Members of the committee, we're now live.
Good evening. I will call the Committee of the Whole Community Development meeting for Tuesday, June 8th, 2021 to order. And I would ask that if you're able to please rise for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibility laid upon us. Our council always strives to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us no longer forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. Thank you. So, this evening we are being clerked by Julia Sipple, and she is being supported by Jennifer Page. And could the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Wall.
Present.
Councillor Carpenter.
Present.
Mayor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Sless.
Present.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Councillor Vanderstelt.
Present.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
And Chair Weaver.
Present. Thank you. I would like to just remind the committee of our viewing public of a few procedural rules for our virtual meetings to operate as efficiently as possible. All members must be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions of members' committee arise. Any member of committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participation list screen, which is the bottom right-hand side of your screen. The clerk staff will lower your hand once your speaking opportunity has been recognized. In the event of a connection service interruption occurs, that affects quorum for the committee of the whole. We may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of committee participating via online video conference will vote using eScribe, and the clerk will announce the vote results. Members of the public who registered as delegates or under the statutory public hearings are able to take part electronically via webcam or via the telephone for the meetings. All rules for the delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. And we have one declaration for conflict of interest. Councillor Wall, I understand you have a pecuniary interest for item 8.2, which is Mohawk Institute, save the evidence. Please confirm and state your general nature of your conflict, please.
I do, and my conflict of interest is that my fiance is a full-time employee at the Woodland Cultural Center.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Slush, you had your hand raised. Was that?
Yes, no, I was just going to say that Councillor Utley was having technical issues, but I see he's on the screen now, so they must have resolved it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Slush. Members of the committee, are there any other declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I'll ask members of the committee that will, what items they would like to have separated for discussion purposes. So, Councillor Wall, can you move the motion to approve all items? Sorry. First, was there any items to be separated? Councillor Van Tilburg?
Yes, I'd like to separate 7.1.1.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carpenter. Sorry, Councillor, you're muted.
7.1.2, please.
Thank you, Councillor. 7.1.2. Any others? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Wall, I understand that you, oh, sorry. I think Councillor Wall, you have the motion to approve all the items for consideration consent, not separated for discussion purposes.
8.1 is automatically separated, is that right?
8.1 is a resolution, I believe,
Yeah.
so that will be separated automatically. We'll have to
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I will read. So moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Van Tilburg, that all items for consideration consent, items 7.1 and 7.2, not separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
And sorry, your secondary again was?
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Thank you. And so we'll have a conversation about those items separated shortly after the statutory hall public hearing. Sorry, let me just figure out where I am. Okay, here we go. So could the clerk please read the titles of all the items subject to the vote and to proceed with the vote?
Thank you. Through the chair, the only items that are approved as subject to this vote are the minutes.
So All those in favor of approving the minutes? Thank you. Vote has been called.
Chair Mine's in the affirmative.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis.
Separated items being the minutes is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Celeste Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Thank you. Committee will now move into the public statutory hall meeting, and that meeting will be chaired by Mayor Davis. Mayor Davis, I'll pass the chair to you now.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. So good evening, everyone. There are two public hearings on tonight's agenda. The public hearings are held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the hearings are to discuss planning applications, to hear from the public either in support of or against the applications. At the end of each public meeting, the committee will pass a recommendation which is generally considered for final decision at the next meeting of council. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should provide their name and address and contact information of the clerk's office. Both public hearings are city initiated. Staff will present first, followed by members of the public. City staff will then have an opportunity to provide clarification to any questions or issues that are raised during the meeting. So we'll now then move on to consider item 5.1, which is the Downtown Community Improvement Plan. And I now ask city staff to appear on behalf of the applicant and to present your application.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Davis and members of council. My name is Nicole Willmott. I'm the Chief Planner and Director of Planning. Planning staff is very excited to present the new Downtown Community Improvement Plan this evening, as well as the Greyfields Community Improvement Plan for council consideration, which are the first of many new policy approaches that will be coming forward to implement your new official plan. The downtown CIP is intended to create new residential units in the downtown, and it also includes an enhanced grant targeted to stimulate the creation of new affordable units, which is a top priority of this council. Increasing the overall number of units and people living in the downtown will increase activity and generate investments in employment, commercial and recreational uses, which will help the city to achieve the overall vision and goals set in our new official plan, which is to encourage the development of the downtown as an intensified city center. Also before you this evening as our second statutory public meeting will be the Greyfield CIP, which mirrors this downtown CIP and focuses on 5 key target areas throughout the city in areas intended to accommodate significant growth, however, are currently characterized by clusters of Greyfield developments. Planning staff are confident that the proposed CIPs before you will put into action the vision of our new official plan to encourage growth in key areas while fundamentally addressing some key objectives of this council. So with that, as I said, we're very excited to present the Downtown Community Improvement Plan, followed by the Greyfields Community Improvement Plan. And I will turn it over now to Victoria Coates to begin her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Through the chair, Victoria Coates, Senior Planner in Long Range Planning, and I will start off with presenting the Downtown Community Improvement Plan. Next slide. So a proposed Downtown Community Improvement Plan was considered by Council in February of this year, which included a property tax increment-based grant program, or a TIG, to incentivize redevelopment projects that include the creation of residential units as either standalone residential developments or as part of mixed-use developments with both commercial and residential units. And at that time, Council referred the CIP back to staff to consider how incentives for affordable housing could be incorporated into the CIP. Next slide. And in accordance with Council's direction from February, planning staff has worked closely with housing and homelessness services staff to revise the proposed downtown CIP so that the TIG program is now structured with 3 streams to provide enhanced grants for projects that include affordable housing units. So this approach is similar to what some other Ontario municipalities are currently using in their TIG program. So municipalities like Hamilton, St. Catharines, Windsor, Chatham-Kent, and Ottawa, where they have two streams for the TIG, with one stream providing base grants for projects with no affordable housing units, and then another stream providing enhanced grants for those projects that include a minimum amount of affordable housing units. Now for Brantford CIP, we're also proposing a third stream with a further enhanced grant to make this structure more Brantford specific and ensure that we are able to directly incentivize the type of affordable housing units that are specifically in need for our households on the Brantford Access to Housing waitlist. So I'll get into the details of each of those three streams later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. So the proposed project area for the downtown CIP, which is the area where the grant program would apply, it's proposed to be aligned with the boundary of the Downtown Brantford Urban Growth Center, or the UGC. And the UGC is delineated in the city's new official plan that was adopted by council in March and is now before the province for final approval. And one of the key objectives that prompted this downtown CIP project was to align the various boundaries that we have for different downtown policies and programs. So this aligning the downtown CIP boundary with the boundary for the Urban Growth Center is one step to ensuring that we have consistent boundaries for our downtown. And offering grants through a CIP in the Urban Growth Center is going to help the city stimulate development, bring more people living and working in our downtown to provide that customer base that's needed to support new and existing businesses in the downtown, ultimately making it a more attractive place for development and investment and spurring further improvements in this area. And in addition, incentivizing residential units is going to help the city meet its density targets that are specific to the UGC. Next slide. So in terms of the proposed TIG program, all properties that are located within the Urban Growth Center would be eligible to apply to the program. And it's intended to support the development of standalone residential or mixed-use developments that result in an increase in the property's assessed value. So generally, we're looking at new buildings or substantial additions to existing buildings. And in accordance with council's direction from February, projects that already have final site plan approval as of council's decision on February 23rd would not be eligible to apply to this program. Next slide. So the property tax increment-based grant will operate as a tax rebate for a defined portion of the increase in municipal property taxes that result from the redevelopment. So the developer is required to pay for the entire cost of the redevelopment project. After it's complete, the property gets reassessed by MPAC. The property taxes go up. The developer needs to continue to pay those increased property taxes each year. And then the city will reimburse the developer a defined portion of that increase in municipal property taxes that resulted from the project. And in accordance with council's direction from February, that annual tax rebate will last for up to 10 years, or once the costs for the redevelopment project have been repaid to the developer, whichever would come first. And eligible redevelopment costs include those costs for materials and labor that are associated with demolition, site preparation, and construction. Now, there is no rebate for the pre-development property tax amount. So that means that throughout the duration of this rebate program, the city will continue to receive the pre-development tax amount that they were receiving prior to the redevelopment. And then finally, it's important to note that with this type of program, the financial impact to the city of providing a grant is offset by the increase in assessment growth and property taxes that's resulting from the redevelopment. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, in the current version of the CIP before council tonight, the TIG is structured to provide grants through one of three streams that's applicable to the type of proposed development. So the first stream is for revitalization projects. So these are projects where all of the residential units are going to be rented or sold at market rates. So there's no affordable units provided. These types of projects are eligible for the base grant, which is equivalent to a tax rebate of up to 80% of the increase in municipal property taxes in years 1 to 5 post redevelopment, 60% in years 6 and 7, 40% in year 8, and then 20% in years 9 and 10. Next slide. The next stream is for affordable housing revitalization projects tier 1. And these projects have to include a minimum of 20% of affordable housing units. And those units must meet the definition for affordable housing that's provided in the city's municipal housing facility bylaw. So this requires that these units would have a rent charge which is equal to or less than 80% of the average market rent. And these types of projects are eligible for an enhanced grant equivalent to a tax rebate of up to 90% of the increase in property taxes in years 1 to 5, 70% in years 6 and 7, 50% in year 8, and then 30% in years 9 and 10. And this stream is similar to the programs that we are seeing some other municipalities providing to address affordable housing needs, and it will be useful to encourage the creation of affordable housing options in Brantford. And in consultation with the city's housing department, there's also a need for units that would exceed these minimum requirements for affordability, because these units that are provided at 80% average market rent, while they do create affordable housing options, they may remain unaffordable for many of our households on the Brantford Access to Housing wait list. So this brings us to the third stream. Next slide, please, which is for affordable housing revitalization projects tier 2. And this stream requires a minimum, that the developments include a minimum of 10% of affordable housing units provided at that 80% of the average market rent. And then additionally, projects must also include a minimum of 10% of affordable housing units that have a rent charge which is further reduced to 60% of the average market rent. And projects in this stream are provided for a further enhanced grant, which would be equivalent to up to 100% of the increase in municipal property taxes in years 1 to 10 post redevelopment. So the greatest grant is provided through this stream in order to provide a significant incentive for projects that are going to directly increase the supply of affordable housing units on our housing wait list. And in addition, these projects are really going to result in an ideal combination of units at market rent, as well as affordable units at varied income levels, which is really the preferred manner of providing affordable housing in these types of mixed income developments. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through a quick example to demonstrate how the tax rebate is calculated. And more detailed calculations for 2 hypothetical property scenarios are included in Appendix F of the staff report. And those calculations really demonstrate how the grant would work under large scale and smaller scale developments across all 3 streams of the TIG program. But for this example, we will assume the project is classified in the middle stream, which is the Affordable Housing Revitalization Project Tier 1. So if pre-redevelopment, the municipal property taxes are $10,000 a year. Post-redevelopment, the property gets reassessed. The taxes go up to $40,000 a year. That means that the increase in property taxes resulting from the redevelopment would be $30,000. So the $30,000 is what the tax rebate would be calculated based on. It would be a percentage of that $30,000. Next slide, please. So in this chart sort of breaks down that rebate over the course of the 10 years. So you can see in years 1 to 5, after the property has been developed and reassessed, the developer gets a rebate of 90% of that increase in property taxes, so 90% of $30,000, which is $27,000, whereas the city would retain 10% of the increase in taxes, as well as that pre-development tax amount, so that $10,000. By years 9 and 10, that rebate decreases to just 30%, whereas the city would retain 70% of the increase in property taxes, in addition to the original pre-development property tax amount. And then by years 11 there and beyond, there's no further tax rebate, and the city retains all of the property taxes. Next slide. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Next slide. Yeah. So planning staff have also prepared an associated implementation plan to accompany the CIP. And it outlines that planning staff would be responsible for administering the program, along with assistance from other departments as necessary, so the finance department and the housing department specifically for those projects that include affordable housing units. The plan also details all of the steps in the application process, outlining that staff will prepare a report to council on each application, and that council will be the approval authority for each application. Marketing strategies are also included to help promote awareness of this program, including developing a CIP webpage, a brochure, and using advertising on the city's social media platforms. Planning staff will also be maintaining a database for monitoring the CIP to ensure that the TIG program is being utilized in achieving its intended outcomes. And it's recommended that planning staff would report back to council with some of those monitoring details to assess the take-up of the property tax increment-based grant and associated impacts. Next slide. So in conclusion, planning staff is of the opinion that the TIG program offered through the proposed downtown CIP is a sustainable financial incentive program that can be used to facilitate new growth in the city's urban growth center and achieve intensification goals, while also encouraging the provision of affordable housing, promoting economic development, and increasing the city's tax base. Therefore, staff recommends that the downtown CIP be adopted and that the downtown urban growth center be designated as the community improvement project area. And if the CIP is approved, staff anticipate being able to receive applications to the TIG in early August of this year, following the conclusion of the CIP appeal period. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Victoria. We'll see who has any questions. And Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Victoria. For the enhanced tier 2 level, did you consider phasing it out like 100% for the first 5 years and then 90, 80, 70 on down for the next 5?
Through the mayor, we did consider that. However, you know, that it's intended to provide a significant incentive to really get developers interested in that stream. So the further you reduce the rents that are charged, obviously the less rental income that's available to a property developer. So it is in line with what some other municipalities are providing, that full 100% rebate over the course of 10 years. So it is considered to be an appropriate incentive to get that type of development with those affordable units.
And what mechanism is there in place to ensure that the rents stay affordable for the full 20 years?
So in order to qualify for both of the affordable housing streams, the affordable units must meet the definition of affordable housing as per the city's municipal housing facility bylaw. And that requires that those units enter, or the owner enter into an agreement with the city that ensures that the units are maintained as affordable for 20 years. So we've sort of tied our existing process for providing affordable units to the CIP to ensure those are meshed. So we're not creating a new process to ensure they're affordable. We have something in place already that we can utilize to ensure that units created through this CIP are maintained as affordable.
So will somebody be checking to make sure that the rents are still affordable by talking to the tenants? Is that the plan?
Through the chair, I think I would have to refer that question to the housing department because they are responsible for implementing that agreement, but there is an agreement that requires it to be affordable. If we do have housing staff may be able to step in and provide a little bit more information on that.
Hi, Deb Schlechter, Acting Director for Housing and Homelessness Services. Through the chair, we do already monitor the agreements that are in place, the existing agreements. We do check on an annual basis. There's some requirements in terms of the reports that they have to provide in terms of the rents that are in place and the income levels of people that are allowed into those units. So we monitor that on a regular basis. And if they are falling short of meeting those requirements, they are in default, and then the agreement becomes default.
And what's the penalty if they become in default?
They lose that opportunity and have to repay the grant.
They have to repay the money they've received?
That's the current policy.
Years? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next for questions, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. So my question was, we received correspondence from a consultant with 2 requests for amendments to the property tax incremental grant program portion of this. And I was wondering should I read them, or do you have a copy of that? And I was wondering if that's something within our mandate or ability, or could be looked at now or another time, or how does that fit in?
Through the mayor, so we do have delegates who are in attendance tonight, who I believe will speak to their letter after this questions. So their two requests are to extend the rebate period for 20 years, and then to also provide the grant instead of as a rebate, to provide it at the start of each year. So in terms of extending the period to 20 years, that's certainly an option for council to consider. However, that does certainly increase the financial impact to the city of extending that program up to 20 years. We propose the 10-year time frame to be consistent with council's previous direction for the TIG program to last for a 10-year time period. And these additional streams that we're proposing are sort of an add-on to that 10-year time frame. And it is consistent with the enhanced grants that we see offered in other municipalities. In terms of providing the grant at the start of the year as opposed to as a tax rebate, that's not the preferred approach here. This grant has been structured as a tax rebate. So it's consistent again with what a lot of other municipalities, how they use these TIG programs. It's also consistent with how the city currently applies its BIF-TIP program. So property owners are required to pay all their taxes in full before they receive that grant.
So two follow-up questions then. In regard to the second item from extending it from 10 to 20 years, is that something that would necessarily have to be done now, or could that be looked at in 5 years from now, or even 9 years from now before it comes to an end, the consideration that maybe we would extend it at a later date?
Through the mayor, absolutely. So one of the recommendations before council tonight is that staff will report back to council in 2024 with sort of an assessment of the uptake of the program and any impacts we're seeing. So, and also in our implementation plan, we've outlined, that staff will be completing ongoing monitoring and reporting to council as necessary. So there's a commitment to continuing to monitor this program in all three streams. So that is something that can be looked at in the future. If the time frame is changed in the future after the CIP has been approved, it will require an amendment to the CIP, but that is certainly an option.
Okay. And then the second follow-up question regarding the upfront or after the fact. Is it possible that could be looked at on a case-by-case basis? And is that ability in here now, or is it just one or the other?
Through the chair, I believe that we are providing a consistent approach here by rebating the taxes once they've been paid in full. I would also just add that taxes as I mentioned previously, that not all of the taxes are rebated regardless of the stream. So for each development, any pre-development tax amount is still required to be paid. So that is something that we will be requiring through this program. It looks like Alan has something to add to this, perhaps.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. Through the mayor to the councillor. Victoria and I did have an opportunity this morning to meet with the delegate, so I won't speak too much on their behalf, but it does seem that what we're hoping to achieve through changing the time of the year when the grant was paid was that they're hoping to have an exemption from municipal taxes for their development. So providing an exemption would be through a different process than through our community improvement plan and this tax increment grant program. So that question might be able to be dealt with through some other financial mechanism beyond the community improvement plan.
I very much appreciate that. Okay, thank you both, and thank you for your presentation.
Next, Councillor Sless for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple here. I guess going back to what Councillor Wall was just talking about, we have the ability through this program to amend site-specific, do we not? If we're trying to intensify somewhere specific to get it done, and it takes an additional something to spur that development to happen on a specific location, can we tailor this program by amendment to a specific? Or is that treading in dangerous water?
Through the chair, so the program, like you can't increase the rebate for a specific development. The rebate schedule is outlined in the CIP, so that 10-year timeframe for each of the 3 streams. There's no flexibility to sort of, bump it up to 20 years for a certain development. If council did want to consider that timeframe, it would need to be added to this or amended. The CIP would need to be amended to reflect that increased timeframe or rebate.
Okay, thanks, Victoria. Then, is this program portable? Does it go with the developer? If after 5 years the property is sold, what happens?
Through the mayor, that's correct. The grant stays with the developer. It's a development incentive, so it's intended to benefit the developer who has incurred the costs and taken the risk of developing in this area.
So if in year 3 he sells the property, the whole process ends and it becomes full market tax?
No, so the grant will continue to be provided to the developer.
To the original developer, he
That's
will continue to get that for the 10 years.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, even though someone else is paying it.
That's correct.
Okay.
So just to clarify there, the grant is provided to offset the cost of the redevelopment. So the grant is provided for 10 years up to a maximum of the eligible redevelopment costs. So the developer is getting their costs back through us rebating the taxes to them.
Okay. Then on your map, I wasn't clear when I looked at the map. You have it outlined in red, the targeted area. When the red line goes down a street, does that include both sides of the street?
Through the chair, no, that doesn't include both sides of the street. So it's all properties within the boundary of the UGC.
So it's the one side that falls within the whole. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's just one side.
Yeah.
And finally, can you refresh my memory? There was 3 specific, and I don't know whether we've got a delegation this evening, but 93 West, 3 Chatham, and 90 Queen was excluded in the way the map was drawn. There's kind of a chunk carved out. Can you tell me again the rationale for that?
Through the chair, so the boundary of the UGC was revised through the new official plan process as part of the municipal comprehensive review. So we took a look at the existing urban growth center and revised it to make it a bit smaller in order to help the city meet its intensification targets for that area. So some areas were removed from the UGC where there was less development potential. That's not to say that there's not potential for intensification, but we have through the council adopted CIP or official plan, this new UGC is focused on a smaller area where there is those greatest potential for intensification.
And that's approved by the province. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it was adopted by council, and now we're just waiting for final approval from the province.
So we have no authority to say include that in the program. We don't have that authority. Then it would have to be amended and go through the province and get approval there as well. Do I understand that correctly?
Through the mayor, council does have the authority to revise the CIP boundary. So you can change the CIP boundary. However, one of the objectives of this downtown CIP project was really to have our boundaries aligned. So we are proposing to keep the CIP boundary consistent with that UGC boundary that's currently before the province.
Okay, thanks, Victoria.
Councillor McCurry, you're next for questions.
Mayor, thank you. Welcome, Victoria. Thanks for all the hard work. Could you explain why the rebate is weighted towards the first 5 years?
Through the mayor. This is sort of a typical sliding scale that we see often in these TIG programs. So I think it's just intended to help get more money to the developer in their initial years where they've made that investment, and it kind of decreases the impact, decreases the grant gradually, so that by the end of the 10 years, the developer or the owner is paying those full property taxes.
So over the course of the 10 years, if my math is correct, they get about 50% rebate on the downtown grant, right?
I would. I'm not quite sure of that math there. Alan, do you have?
I think that's a reasonable approximation. I mean, not every situation is going to be the same because there's so many variables that come into play with respect to, you know, what the assessed value of the property is and the amount of the tax increase and the amount of units, the tenure of those units. But certainly there would be some examples where it would be 50%.
I'll take that as a yes. So in the end, on every project, it's the decision of council, correct?
That's correct.
I wonder if you could give us an estimate of what you feel your staff time is going to be to process each of these applications.
Through the mayor, that is a good question. I think that I think in the initial rollout of the program, there's going to be some more staff time required to get things up and running. We do have experience implementing a downtown CIP previously, which we've done in-house in the planning department. So I think that we do have the capacity, at least initially, to continue to implement this program. As I mentioned previously, we are going to be reporting back to council. So if we do find, we're getting tons and tons of applications, I think we would need to reevaluate at that time whether or not we have the capacity to continue to implement it. But at this time, we expect, the applications we're anticipating receiving in the next couple of years, we do have the capacity to process those.
So you can guarantee for, let's say, 2021 and 2022 that you won't need any additional staff to process applications?
Through the mayor, I will leave that to Nicole to answer that question.
Good evening through the mayor to the councillor. At this point in time, we don't anticipate any additional staff resources in order to process the applications. As Victoria said, we do work with other departments to bear the brunt of that workload as well. However, as Victoria noted, we do plan to report back in 2024. And if we feel at that time that there's just a significant amount of applications that we're finding a backlog and maybe some of our work objectives, then we will come forward with those recommendations at that time.
I was actually looking for a yes, but that'll suffice. No, I don't see any consideration given in here to heritage properties. We've seen one development downtown where a developer has recognized the value to his project of maintaining a building which is listed on our heritage inventory. Is there going to be some consideration with respect to developers who are willing to incorporate heritage buildings into their developments?
Through the mayor, the heritage considerations weren't specifically a consideration in this CIP, but I would note that we do have our heritage grant program. It's a pilot program, and we are planning to report back to council on that program. So there may be opportunities to consider how those incentives can be used here. I would say that the CIP has been structured so that, a development that uses a heritage building, incorporates it into a new development would certainly be eligible for this type of grant. And that could be a way to make it viable to retain our heritage resources in the downtown.
So would part of our reasoning for creating the heritage register is to let developers see what is important to the corporation of the city of Brantford for retention with respect to our heritage assets. Could we take that as an understanding then that staff would not be looking keenly upon a developer who would be sending one of our heritage buildings to the landfill to create a new building?
Through the mayor, yes, staff, when we review development applications and they affect a listed heritage resource on our heritage register, we do require applicants to prepare a heritage impact assessment, and the preferred approach is always to retain our heritage resources and incorporate them into a new development as opposed to demolition. So we certainly look at that through every application that comes in.
Now, this may be not one that you can answer yourself, Victoria, but I wonder if there's a member of staff who could comment on the comparative cost to the municipality of providing, say, a tax rebate for an affordable housing unit versus paying to create an affordable housing unit.
Through the mayor to the councillor. Again, I think we would have to defer to our colleagues in the housing department. They have the most experience dealing with new affordable housing builds. So if I could ask maybe one of them to jump on and provide any clarification that they may.
Deb Schlichter. Yes, I think right now our current budget that we've put together for a per unit cost for an affordable housing build is around 250,000 a unit. That's our budget for a future affordable housing. The costs are increasing on a regular basis, and so those prices could be also climbing in the future. Thanks.
So Deb, would you say that this is a pretty affordable way for us to provide affordable housing?
It's another option, another tool in the toolbox.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. That's my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Vanderstelt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Victoria. I love the new microphone. I can hear you much better than the old microphone. Well done. Good job. Do we have a recommendation on the percentage of commercial or potential commercial units on the main floor for all of our 3 streams, or do we have a recommendation in the hopes of bringing more opportunities for commercial investment in the core?
Through the mayor, that's not something that's included in the CIP. However, I would say that the zoning for the downtown does require commercial units. We're also currently working on a new zoning bylaw, and sometimes in downtowns you see a minimum requirement for a certain gross floor area of commercial units. So that might be something that's considered in the new zoning bylaw.
So typically, regardless of the stream that's chosen, or the timelines or the percentages that are chosen, we would find commercial typically on the main floor and residential above.
That's correct.
Okay. And we have come across a situation where an application came through on Market Street for that very idea. And do we have a height restriction on what we can build in the core based on any of the parameters in this CIP?
Through the chair, the CIP does not have height requirements. Again, those would be dealt with through the zoning bylaw.
Through zoning. Yep. Okay. Thank you so much, Victoria. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Victoria, I got a couple of questions before we go to second questioners. You mentioned that, so the rebate goes to the developer builder, the original developer builder, and even if they sell it, they would still get the rebate. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And what about, so they would no longer own the building, the obligation to only impose, depending which stream it is, 80%, 10%, 80%, 10% would be 60% affordable. Does that apply to the building and continue to apply to the building to control the rents, despite the fact that the original owner is now?
Yeah, through yes, that's correct. So in most cases, I think where you'd see a building be sold is probably for a condo development where there are not affordable units included. So that's where the grant would stick with that developer. I think in a lot of cases with the affordable housing units, that might be a consistent property owner from development on. But yes, the requirement to have affordable units will definitely stick with the property, and that's covered through that agreement that I mentioned previously.
And my understanding is that this credit as opposed to a rebate, is that because that's what you have to do to comply with some provincial act that says you can't credit taxes, but you can set up a rebate program, or
through the
I totally misunderstanding that?
Through you, I think that it's not a requirement of the Planning Act or the Municipal Act that you provided in that way. I think it's a way to make it a sort of a sustainable financial incentive program for the municipality that taxes are collected and paid in full, and then we're able to use that money to rebate to the owner, as opposed to having to set aside a separate reserve to pay grants. Grants capital grants can certainly be provided, but this type of program.
No, Victoria, you don't understand my question. My question is, because I think it's being suggested to us, don't pay say it's 50% of the property tax. Don't pay at the end of the year, just drop the tax obligation so that the owner only pays 50% of the tax. It's like a credit.
Right.
Right off the front. Can that be done?
Through you, I think I would defer that to the finance department to comment. As I mentioned previously, it's been our approach to provide it as a rebate once taxes have been collected in full.
Through the mayor, it's
I see, Patrick.
It's Pat Telfer, manager of revenue and tax collector. We don't really know what the increase in taxes are until June when we issue the tax bill. So we need to be able to calculate the rebate. It also gives us a chance to see if there's been any changes to the property. It goes to your other question too. If the ownership does change, there is a risk that the tax class or the assessed value may change going forward. The biggest risk I see is if Laurier purchases the property and that the property goes exempt, we would have to have something built into the agreement that basically terminates that rebate to the developer at that time. So every year we need to review the tax class and assessment and status of that property before the rebate is given.
So the devil will be in the detail of the agreement.
I'm suggesting that there would have to be something in the agreement that would force us to check that and could possibly terminate that the rebate. If we don't have the increased taxes, we are unable to provide that rebate.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Next up, first round questions, Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we have a developer that builds an apartment building and they apply for this grant, and so a certain percentage of those units are affordable, and the owner of the building decides to sell, I think one of the things that, as we've seen in other meetings, there's really a need for developers to be able to go into a condo unit. So what if a new owner was to pay the condo fees for those units that are affordable? Would the city allow the rest of the building to become a condo corporation if the developer paid the condo fees for those units? Is that something that would be possible? Because I think that might actually sweeten the pot as well for developers to come in knowing that we would allow that. Again, I have no idea if it's legal or if it's something we can do, but I would be interested in hearing from staff.
Through the mayor, so the units must be affordable rental units as defined in the city's bylaw. It's my understanding, I don't know if they would be able to, I understand what you mean, that a portion of them, they would all be condo, but a portion would be held under one ownership and provided as rental units. I'm wondering if Deb, if you might have some input on whether or not that would meet the definition in the affordable or the municipal housing facility bylaw.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I can answer that. The way the bylaw, facilities bylaw is written is that as long as it's a rental unit, so it looks like that might be possible, but that's as far as I'm able to go, I think, on guessing about that. I think we'd have to research and come back with a better answer.
I see Nicole.
Thank you. So through the mayor to the councillor. So I just wanted to note that in absence of an answer today, I can say that an application for a condominium would be a separate planning application. And I would see that being something that we would have to, based on the developer's proposal, something that we would have to address through that site-specific application that we would be bringing forward, where we would be presenting that financial impact analysis through our report and for a council recommendation at that time. So I definitely think that there's a way to evaluate that, and there's a way to look at, and as I said, there's definitely a Planning Act application required in order to look at that. So that might be something that we would have to work with the developer on to understand what their proposal would look like, and there may require an amendment to the housing facility agreement or even the CIP as well.
So do you think something like that would be enticing, Nicole?
I think that's something I mean, I think we're always seeing new options and new things come forward in order to continue to make these types of programs work for the developers who are building the units. I think it's hard for us to anticipate every option or every possibility out there, but I think that that's why it's important, as planning staff have noted, that these programs are going to continue to evolve and change over time, just as the objectives of this council will continue and change over time. So we want to have that opportunity to continue to bring these programs back to you and look at some of those amendments that may be possible, because we may be seeing new scenarios out there that we want to build into these CIP programs. But it's a little hard at this stage, and it being new to not only our municipality, but also other municipalities that have implemented these programs. They're very new. We've only found examples of municipalities who've had them in place maybe over a year. So not a lot of stats to report on. So that's why I think it's important that we continue to assess them, and then we can build those changing objectives into the program as needed.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. So we did talk about whether or not a specific group would be able to get a further discount of some kind. Has there been any thought of looking at sort of sector specific not-for-profit organizations to see if we have a stream for them that might, again, be a bit more enticing, and then a stream for regular developers? Has that been a thought? Because I would suspect that if a service club or some organization comes into the city to run a building, they're gonna stay here. And hopefully if we can provide them some savings, that might equate to another building being built in our community. So is that something that we've looked at yet? Or is it, again, something that we shouldn't do because it's a legal issue?
Through the mayor, yeah. So right now it's not targeted to a specific sector. So it is just, whoever would be providing that development would be eligible for the same grant, but it is something we could continue to monitor and investigate and report back when we take a look at that in 2024.
So just prior to that, I would be interested to maybe see if housing staff could just take a look at that and see if that's something that they feel would be beneficial. And if it is, I'd be happy to have that conversation with housing staff after. So thank you very much, Victoria.
So Martin, I know you've been waiting patiently, but I think we've exhausted all the first-time questioners, so your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Victoria. If a building qualifies under the tier 2, and then in year 4 it becomes non-compliant, do they have to repay all the money, or the difference between the tier 2 and the base?
Through the mayor, that's something that would be specifically outlined in the agreement that's required for this program. So there's a financial incentive program agreement that would apply. In my discussions with some other municipalities, they do allow for that sort of downgrade for the different grants. So as you said, if you applied for the affordable housing and now you no longer provide affordable housing, could you downgrade to the base grant? I think that would be an option. It's just that we would have to build that specifically into the agreement to allow for that to happen.
Okay, and you're saying that the rebate continues to go to the developer even if they sell the building. What happens if it becomes non-compliant the year after they sell it? Do they have to? Does the developer have to repay the difference?
So the developer would, when we're talking about repaying the difference, sorry, just to clarify here, repaying the difference was in regard to the affordable housing component. So whoever is providing that affordable housing would be responsible for paying back that grant if it's no longer compliant. So the
new owner would have to repay that portion of the grant.
The grant. I'm sorry. I'm going to need a little bit of assistance here on this one. I'm getting a little tongue-tied here.
No, that's okay. I will attempt and try not to get tongue-tied. So I think what you're asking is that if a developer sells the building to somebody and the original developer is getting the rebate and the new owner defaults on the agreement, what happens? And I think at the end of the day, the rebate is intended to go back to the developer who originally incurred the cost. So we've already established that as being a priority. And while we have indicated that the developer, we don't transfer the grant, what we do see, and is typical, and we do find this out from other programs that we run, that oftentimes that there is an agreement between the seller and the purchaser that maintains that grant be provided, or at least it's offset in the purchase price. So I think what you're asking really is what happens if they default between the agreement of themselves, and those are agreements that are not, the city is not party to. So at the end of the day, we would require that any monies that are being paid would have to be repaid back to the municipality. But again, those are scenarios that we would.
No, we lost her.
So through the mayor, I can just
We've
add here
lost.
that when we are preparing our our financial incentive agreements that are registered, we will be working closely with the legal department to ensure that we have those mechanisms in place for different scenarios for the default. I don't quite have those details outlined for all of the different scenarios, but that is something we will be working closely with the legal department on.
Okay. Might I make a suggestion that the rebate program should be transferred to the new owner? That would allow the developer to get the rest of their money up front by improving the sale price of the property. So I think that can be done in such a way that the developer still gets the benefit. They get the balance of the benefit when they sell the building, and then the onus is on the new owner.
So,
to
Councilor Martin, getting to a question.
Through the mayor, what Nicole was speaking to there is what often happens in the real world is that developer and the new owner, they enter into a private agreement to transfer those funds. So from the city's perspective, we don't have to be party to that agreement. And in addition, I would just add that as part of the CIP process, we are required to circulate the CIP to the province for comment. And one of their comments was to remove that ability to transfer because it does create administrative issues from the city side. So that type of agreement can certainly be entertained privately, but the city doesn't need to be a party to it.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Councilor Carpenter, you're next.
Thank you. Just speaking to it, then maybe Deb can answer this one, but the affordable housing agreement, part of this program, would be registered on title, but or not, would it be part of the agreement wherever the building goes? It's a 20-year agreement for affordable housing units as part of the affordable housing program here. So would that not be the case?
Through the mayor, I think it's Deb there. I think that is correct. So it's an agreement that requires units to be maintained as affordable for 20 years. I believe it is registered on title. We'll have Deb confirm.
The municipal facilities agreements that we have in place are just agreements that are clarifying around the 20-year period, and if they default in that period, what the remedies are for that. It's a special agreement just for those particular units that fall under that criteria. This particular CIP tax increment grant is a little different. It might use the same criteria as the municipal housing facilities bylaw. It's a different period of time, and it would have different criteria around what the defaults look like, I think.
Okay, thank you, Deb. I'd like when this comes to council to have that clarified on what the agreement would look like and what the default would be. Thank you.
All right, Councilor McCurry, questions?
Some of our discussion in the last few minutes has been in relationship to things that may happen further down the road. And given that staff and councilors tend to move on, would we not perhaps be better situated to provide the entirety of our grant over the first 5 years when folks' memories are going to be intact and there's less likelihood of transfer of ownership?
Through the mayor, so again, transfer of ownership isn't going to impact the payment of the grant. It's an option that council can consider. The duration of the program can be shortened, lengthened. It's up to council to provide that. In staff's research, a 10-year timeframe is most common. And in order to remain competitive with other municipalities, that 10-year timeframe has been proposed, and it was what council directed us to proceed with in February. But it is certainly an option.
Sure. I'm not sure that any prospective developer is going to be looking at the time frame. They're going to be looking at the dollars and cents. So staff wouldn't have an issue with us perhaps considering that option, providing all the money in a shorter time frame.
Through the mayor, no, that's not an issue.
Okay, thanks, Victoria.
All right, I'm not seeing any more raised hands. So Victoria, thank you very much. It was a very thorough presentation and you answered lots of questions. So now we now move to the that part of this hearing process where the floor is open to members of the public who wish to speak to the item, and using the virtual format, which of course we're currently operating under, members of the public would register prior to this meeting so that they can enter through this Zoom platform. And we have 2 registered members of the public who wish to speak to this this matter. And so we'll ask them to be brought forward. I believe we have Patrick Masterson and Tim Welch.
Hello, yes, my name is Patrick Masterson.
All right.
Mayor Davis, members of
Can you
council.
just also state your address?
Yes, so Tim Welch Consulting, Cambridge, Ontario. We're here on behalf of JC Homes, Brantford, JC Homes, yes. So
right. Go ahead, Mr. Welch.
Thank you. Mayor Davis, members of council, city staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As I mentioned, my name is Patrick Masterson, housing consultant with Tim Welch Consulting. We have almost 20 years experience working in the affordable housing development and policy sectors across Ontario. And we're here on behalf of our client, JC's Brantford Nonprofit Homes. Some of you may be familiar with them. TWC have provided a letter to committee and council in advance of the meeting. We appreciate the opportunity for this submission and to be considered at this evening's meeting. Known colloquially as JC Homes, they're represented at the meeting this evening as well by their property manager, Laurie McIntyre. JC Homes have operated in the city of Brantford since 1985, a non-profit. They're governed by a volunteer board of directors, and they've been providing operating housing in 89 scattered homes across the city. Their portfolio is separated into 3 mortgage phases. Phase 1 mortgages, roughly about a third of their portfolio. Their mortgages ended last year. Phase 2 end in 3 weeks' time, actually, on June 30th. And phase 3 are due to end in the next 18 months. So for close to 2 years, TWC have been working with JC Homes. We're assisting and to identify and then develop a site to further expand their portfolio and create modern affordable housing units in Brantford. We located a site at 32 Bridge Street, and I'm happy to say that JC Homes are in the final stages, going over the final hurdles in the purchase of this site. The project will create 24 units, 9 of which will be affordable at 80% medium market rent as per CMHC. Just to make layman's terms, that will work out at about $596 per month for a bachelor unit. These units will be designed and built to high accessibility and environmental standards. The 24 units will be made up of 9 bachelor units, 9 one-bed units, and 6 two-bed units. I'm happy to take questions on the specifics of the project after this, but currently the site is close to site plan approval, and we are working with city staff and the project architect planner IBI group to finalize site plan approval. At the turn of the year, December 2020, in collaboration with the housing department at the city, and specifically through the good work of Deb Schlichter, who spoke here, JC Homes made an application to the CMHC Rapid Housing Initiative to develop modular housing on the site. RHI, Rapid Housing Initiative, was hotly competitive with $500 million available in funding through the major city stream. There were over $4 billion worth of applications nationally. So that's a 9-to-1 ratio. JC Homes, the city's joint application, although competitive, was rejected in round 1, unfortunately. TWC did pivot along with JC Homes and have developed a pro forma that keeps the project alive. This is possible through the refinancing of some of those phase 1 mortgage-free homes. 17 of that phase 1, not all of the phase 1, but 17 of those mortgage-free phase homes were refinanced, and we're in the final stages of that too with Van City Investment Bank. We're expecting that to close next week, and the loan total will provide $2.8 million in equity to the project. This is a significant contribution from a nonprofit in any case, $2.8 million. The project is also applying to the CMHC Co-Investment Fund to access capital funding in a low interest loan, with some other minor funding, namely the seed funding for some design and initial soft costs. So CMHC are a funding partner on this, we hope. The project has taken advantage of the waiver of development charges due to the site's location, again 32 Bridge Street, within the community improvement project area. We thank the City of Brantford for their initiative on this. Again, we're very appreciative. The project would not be possible from a viability standpoint if this was not on the table. TWC has also had initial negotiations with the Housing Department to provide 5 rent supplements to the market units, so the remaining units that are not in the 9 MMRs. So that would increase the overall affordability footprint of the project. So with the 9 medium market rents plus 5, that's 14 out of 24 units would be what we would call affordable, and termed affordable by CMHC and by the City of Brantford. This would make the development eligible for tier 3, as was described in the previous presentation. So that's 100% of the property tax rebate for 10 years. However, the operational budget for the project and its viability hinges on property taxes exemptions for an initial 20 years. This is what we have been working off in the early stages of 2021 as we finalized the budget. So that's a key point. Both recommendations in the letter that we've sent to committee and council ask that you can consider a friendly amendment to the report to incorporate these noted features. As with any situation with different funding streams and waivers where there's multiple stakeholders, matching requirements of each program is extremely difficult, and I know you'll appreciate that. The proposed payment and subsequent rebate of property taxes at year end, which there's been a discussion on, although has the same net result at year end following rebate being paid, CMHC as a mortgage financer or bank will struggle to see this as property tax exemptions or forgiveness. This will be an issue, not just for JC Homes, but for maybe some other nonprofits or affordable housing developments in the future when trying to display the flexible annual operational surpluses that are built into their viability spreadsheets. The second recommendation is the ask for 20 years of affordability, which is couched within the CIP requirement. We asked that the 20 years of affordability requirement that's couched within the CIP requirement, that this timeframe is matched and the 20 years of property tax rebate or ideally exemption, as my previous point, is considered. The report is timely. TWC on behalf of JC Homes was intending to start a discussion with the city on this topic. We appreciate the opportunity to do so here. Perhaps this is the beginning of a discussion on another approach, and I do appreciate Councillor Wall's comments earlier on and others about maybe a case-by-case basis, but we do ask you to consider these recommendations whether within this TIG or within another opportunity down the line. But also just want to finish by sincerely thanking the progressive nature of the city stance with this report and its intentions. I also want to acknowledge the assistance thus far from housing and planning staff who met with us at short notice as recently as this morning. So thank you. I'm happy to take questions. And again, thanks very much.
So does anybody have any questions? I've got a question for you, Mr. Masterson. So I think you're telling us that in the case of the development that you've been talking about, 32 Bridge Street, that the 20 years makes that, I guess, doable. Is that what you're telling us?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. This is highly contingent on property tax exemption, as the phrase I would use. Right. As I mentioned, we're happy to share, the numbers and figures for this particular development of how it works. Shoestring budget, as with a nonprofit, and it really does hinge on that. As I mentioned, the development charges is great. The property taxes is the second piece of the puzzle.
Right. And are you getting any other government grants other than the CMHC reduced interest?
So unfortunately, the provincial federal dollars right now are tight with regards grants. There are very little opportunity there. CMHC is a low interest loan, but it is a mortgage. There is a small contribution tied to that. It's approximately $400,000 or a little less. So we may access that as part of the co-investment. But no, it's equity from the nonprofit JC Homes. It's co-investment, and of course your assistance with development charges that needs to be considered, and also the rent supplement. 5 rent supplements will help with the overall affordability as well.
So what are you telling us then, that what might be needed will vary from project to project depending on the individual financing, government grants? It could be 10 years in one that makes it doable, and the other one it might be 15 years or 20 years.
Absolutely. It depends on the project. It depends on the funding streams. Initially, when we made the Rapid Housing Initiative application, and we were hopeful, there was great opportunity there, as that was a more heavy loaded grant. And we did not even feel there would be a need for such a large equity contribution, perhaps just the purchase price of the land. Of course, we had to increase that amount when that was rejected, and then we had to ask for a little bit more from co-investment. I will say that the Rapid Housing Initiative application is not completely dead in the water. RHI 2 has been announced, but unfortunately, the timelines for that and the guarantee that that will be approved is it's unknown. So JC Homes are very ambitious and they want to move forward with this. They've located the site, and maybe as often in our discussions with them, they are looking to do this one project and then they want to move on and do more. So you've got a real partner in the city of Brantford in JC Homes, and we're happy to be assisting them. And I think that your consideration for this project is appreciated.
Now, you've mentioned several times this rapid financing money. Those are housing grants from the federal government?
So the Rapid Housing Initiative is a federal program administered by CMHC. Modular housing is a buzzword at the moment. Some of you may have heard of it. The requirement of the Rapid Housing Initiative is that it is completed within 12 months currently. And so modular housing is the most viable way to do that. JC Homes did consider that, but unfortunately were rejected in the first round.
Right. So because you didn't get the rapid federal government financing or grant, you're saying it'd be in essence, the property taxpayer would impact or would make it doable by going from 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks very much for answering those questions, Mr. Masterson. So does anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Masterson? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Masterson. So we will be dealing with this very short order. So we'll ask you to go back to the waiting room.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. So staff, do we have a second delegation, or is this just the one?
Through the chair, it was the two combined, Ms. McIntyre and Mr. Masterson. So there's no more.
Yeah. I guess I should have asked, because I noticed that Ms. McIntyre was there, whether there's anything else she wanted to add. Or
through the chair, she's been moved out of the room, but it was my understanding she was here to answer questions if necessary. So
okay. All right. All right. So so we have no other delegations or members of the public that have registered. And so we'll now ask staff, as the applicant, if you come back and provide us with any further comments you wish to deal with issues raised through the delegation.
Through the chair, I don't have anything further to add, but happy to answer any questions of council.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, I'm seeing questions. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once the property is built and it qualifies under the tier 2, I'm assuming they would be allowed to raise the rents on all their units by the guideline amount that the province sets out every year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the affordable units must be maintained at that affordable level, but yes, it does go up depending on the year. The market rate units are able to be raised as well.
Okay, thank you. And if Pat Telfer's still there, I have a question about if an apartment building is converted to condo, what does that do to the property taxes? Does it go from multi-residential to residential?
Through the mayor, yes, each one of the individual condos will get assessed as a residential property, and the combined value of all those condo units would then become the overall value for that building.
Okay, and when that's been done in the past, have we seen an increase or a decrease in the property taxes for the address?
I would have to do some follow-up analysis on that. Just thinking theoretically, I think the value would go up, but I would have to verify that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate confirmation on that. Thank you.
I can do that for council.
Thank you.
Councillor Weaver, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to actually ask staff if we could possibly, sort of a social service chair, have a meeting with housing staff to see if there's not some kind of creative amendment we might be able to make for council, specifically for not-for-profit organizations that are interested in building in our community. So would staff be available sometime, maybe tomorrow, anytime tomorrow, to have a discussion about this?
Hi, I'm Marlene Miranda, General Manager of Community Service and Social Development. We'd absolutely make time to have that discussion. If you want to just send me some available times, we'll accommodate Councillor Weaver.
Yeah, I'm available anytime. Just go ahead and book that. Thank you very much. So again, the intent would be to look and see if there's not an amendment that we can bring forward as a council to see if we can assist not-for-profit organizations to entice them to build in our community. So hopefully I'll be able to bring that amendment to council. Thank you.
All right, so Councillor Sless, any questions?
I think or Councillor Weaver just kind of hit on where I was going with this. I was going to ask if staff, we've got an obvious eager partner to move forward with, and I would hope that we can find a way to make that project work while not compromising the whole program, but to somehow slot it in somewhere to accommodate their need to make sure that this project got built. So I guess, Councillor Weaver, that's probably your discussion coming up tomorrow. So I'll leave it at that, but I would certainly encourage staff to have a hard look at that and come up with a creative way of making that happen. Because I think, as we heard this evening, they're quite prepared to do more. This is kind of a first shot at this, but what I heard this evening was they would like to do more of these, and obviously they have the means to. They're raising millions of dollars in capital through their current assets. So I think we've got a good, solid partner here. So I would hope that we can come up with something ahead of council that we can move forward with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Not yet in discussion. Councillor Vanderstone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Marlene, could you include me in that conversation as well for tomorrow? Deb, if you are available, through you, Mr. Mayor. There you are. Deb, along the entire continuum of housing that we are trying to provide for people who desperately need it, the numbers that we're hearing from the presenter in terms of actual costs per unit, a bachelor apartment, correct me if I'm wrong, around $500. If a program such as a 20-year program could aid and assist us in providing those kinds of numbers for an apartment, for a bachelor apartment, what, in your estimation, with current numbers today that you're aware of, what's the need for those $500 bachelor apartments? What's the number of needs that we'll have on the books today?
Through the chair, it would be an estimate that there's a number of people currently on our wait list who don't need a deep level subsidy. They just need they have some ability to pay at that level, 500. I would say some of the folks that are on the lowest income, who have the shelter rate of ODSP or Ontario Works, that would still be too high. But what it does allow is for that middle group who just needs, who may be working part-time or working at a very low wage, it certainly would meet that group's need.
And how big is that middle group?
We haven't really looked at the wait list in terms of the categories of income groupings, but we're hoping with the new database system that we will have in place that we can pull off reports like that. We could look at different bands of income within the wait list.
Yeah, and when are we expecting to be able to do that, Deb?
We were hoping by the end of Q2 second quarter this year, but it looks like it's been delayed again. But we're in the process of migrating data over, so we're going to be running 2 parallel systems for a while just to test it. So the go live date might be not till fall.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Deb. I'm not seeing any other raised hands for questions, so that concludes the public hearing portion of this particular item. And so we'll now move on to deal with the actual resolution and debate regarding it. I believe Councillor Wall, you're prepared to move this item 5.1. If so, would you please state your seconder?
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Van Tilburg.
And so we'll get this up on the screen. If you can just read it, please.
Downtown Community Improvement Plan 2021-369. A, that report 2021-369 titled Downtown Community Improvement Plan be received, and B, that the Downtown Brantford Urban Growth Center delineated in the new City of Brantford official plan envisioning our city 2051 as shown in figure 1 of report 2021-369 be designated as a community improvement project area, and C, that the necessary implementing bylaw to designate a community improvement project area be presented to council for adoption, and D, that the Downtown Community Improvement Plan attached as Appendix A to Report 2021-369 be adopted, and E, that the necessary implementing bylaw to adopt the Downtown Community Improvement Plan be presented to council for adoption, and F, that pursuant to Section 1723 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to the planning matter. And G, that the Downtown CIP Implementation Plan attached as Appendix B to Report 2021-369 to guide the administration of the Downtown Community Improvement Plan, including ongoing monitoring, be received, and H, that staff be directed to report back to council by early 2024 with an assessment of the uptake and related impacts of the property tax increment-based grant program following the initial 2 years of project administration. I'd love to speak to this, Mayor Davis.
Yeah, and sorry, your seconder is Councillor Van Tilburg?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're first up.
So, huge shout out to staff for all of their incredible work on this. This was a mountainous task, and you did admirably. And I am so appreciative that we have you to help support our downtown. And let it be known that this council has the downtown's best interest at heart, as well as the rest of the city. But as many people know, the downtown of any major urban center is typically the heart of a city. And it's where institutions are, where education is, where services are. And our downtown is a brilliant and beautiful place filled with history and amazing people. And I am so thankful to be on a council that takes into account how important it is to support a healthy downtown. And I can't wait to see this pass.
Next, Councillor Toski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. This is not going to be perfect. It's a new program. We've certainly pointed out tonight how complicated it can be and how many individual circumstances may come up. I think it's brilliant. I think what staff have done to get us started is very well done. They've gone away and incorporated everything that we asked for in terms of tiered programming and you know, the length of times and things like that. I do think it's been pointed out tonight. You know, there's been lots of questions about, can we look at these on an individual basis? I'm hoping that what doesn't happen is that we take every single situation and undo what's been done here by staff. But I do see the opportunity, maybe sector-based, and a nonprofit might be certainly the sector that makes the most sense to have something more specific to. So I think this is great. I think that there's going to be a lot of modification as we go. I think that the incentive has to match the risk, and that the rebate follows the developer, to me, makes perfect sense. They're the ones who took the risk, who put the money up front. And it's the cleanest way to run that part of the business for the city, as far as I can see. So I look forward to this program rolling out. I certainly hope it's going to be supported. Council has had a lot of really good innovative ideas with this too. So I see this only improving as we go forward. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes. Former ward mate, Councillor Newman, I hope you're watching. This has been a long time coming. And to see the boundaries of the urban growth and the CIP aligned is what he wanted to see in his last term, and put forward that motion to start looking at ways. We didn't go down the right path initially. But we've learned a lot, and this strikes the balance. And I think that this is going to get the acceptance of all of council. I know early on in the term, the mayor had a different vision on what it should be, and that seems to be very much incorporated in this. I believe that some of these were taken from Hamilton. So, you know, I watched the delegation with interest. And I see what their goals are and how they align with ours. But I mean, I have to wait to see what staff can come back, because the whole idea of the CIP is what the gains are. And so when you do gains, they are for everybody within it. And because that's where we were having problems before, trying to see how do we balance this. So I don't know where it's going to go. I'll be looking for that part in the future. But I can't say how pleased I am with what's come before us and all the twists and turns it's taken to get here. And I think it's been worth it, because I think what we've got here is pretty darn solid to move forward on. And there's going to be a lot of happy people inside the urban growth area that were not benefiting from being inside the urban growth area. So aligning those boundaries up with the provincial boundaries of what it was supposed to be, that's going to take away a lot of headaches that I was receiving. I'm sure Councillor Waller in his first term, that was the learning curve of, are you in or are you in the line, or are you outside the line? And those lines zigzagged all over the place. So just want to say I'm very happy with this, and I hope to see council support it entirely.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to thank staff for an excellent report. It's a huge amount of work that's gone into getting it to this stage. Secondly, thank the Ward 5 councillors for their support and hard work in pushing this through to fruition. And lastly, I'm very happy to support this very worthwhile, very productive piece, one more piece of the puzzle to rejuvenate our downtown. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, next, Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to support this. I see it as a win-win. We're targeting where we want development to take place, and when we're able to do that and get intensification where we need it and need it desperately, but we're doing it without having to go to the taxpayer and saying, well, you have to pony up some money because we've got to, we've done a number of grant programs, but they always had a budget attached to them, and we had to feed that budget. And there was always a constant fund that had to be topped up to make the program work. We're here, there's no capital investment by the city. Yes, there's a bit of a delay in getting all the tax that's due on a property, but it's tax that we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't had the program. So there's really no downside to what we're doing. And I'm sure that there are developers watching this evening that have been sitting waiting, because this has been talked about for a long time, and it almost came to fruition in February, and then it got fine-tuned to where we are tonight. And I think you'll see a lot of activity happen very, very quickly once this program is put into place. It's an active program that they can access. So I think we're going to see it from all directions. I think the nonprofits are already coming forward with projects they would like to do. And I'm sure the private sector will be right behind them with projects. If you're giving breaks out, I think you'll see the private sector start to line up to take advantage of that. And like I said, it's targeting an area where we want development. There's things downtown that we need to correct. There's no question about that. We have shortcomings downtown that are being worked on. And I think a good way to work on them is to put more people downtown, because I think people on the streets make other people on the streets feel safer. And the more people we have downtown and living downtown and working downtown, because there's a commercial component to this, I think we'll all be better off. So this is an exciting program, and I'm really pleased to support it. And I think it's no question the right thing to be doing. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'd like to thank staff for bringing in this as a tax incentive program. Because of that, there is no financial impact, as Councillor Sless has indicated. And that needs to be kept in mind, because if you're going to amend this and give the money up front, then it will require a budget. Then it will require taxpayer money going into it in the front end. And it no longer is no financial impact if you make that kind of a change. So I agree with what staff have done here, and I don't think we need to tinker with it. I think the uptake will be there for this program as it is, and I think that we just need to pass this and get this in place.
Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thanks to staff for listening to the comments when this came before us in February. Affordable housing wasn't part of the tax grant, and when I asked the question, could it not be part of a community improvement plan, staff said of course it could. So we sent it back and saying, let's look at those options. And I think Councillor Weaver raised another good point today about not-for-profits, and I think that could be fit in too if we just work on it a little bit. I think that's very feasible. And I'm just happy that staff put in the affordable housing. We've been saying how much we need affordable housing. We've been screaming it, but this way we're actually doing something with it. So this will make the private sector get involved in affordable housing for a good reason, and the incentive will be there for that. So I really appreciate the staff listening to all the concerns we raised back in February. Thank you.
Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. I won't reiterate a lot of what's been said, but I am pleased that I'm able to support this tonight, as I wasn't able to at the original iteration for many of the same reasons as Councillor Carpenter has alluded to. I'm pleased to see that this speaks to our commitment to provide quality affordable housing for so many folks in our community. Over 1,000 households need affordable housing, and this again it's a testament to our commitment that we've demonstrated to do this tonight. And as well, it follows on with a difficult decision we made to convert a municipal asset into affordable housing funds some time ago. Mayor, thank you.
Yeah, I'd say this is, if there's anything we've done in this council that'll have lasting impact over decades, there's several decisions we've made, this will be one of them. And it's interesting how this has evolved. It began with, a discussion or in the term, what can we do, as Councillor Sluss says, bring more people to live downtown, making a more healthy downtown, and what are our options? And so it's interesting how it's morphed and developed, given the need that we saw as a council to respond to some of the challenges and issues facing our community, which, and for this council in particular, it's been housing. And I've got to commend staff. I mean, what you presented to us tonight, it's interesting how you've got these 3 different streams of grants, rebates, and kind of accomplishing different purposes, but some of them actually accomplishing the same thing, which is bring development and building downtown and people living downtown. But that 3rd stream in particular, which will generate 10% of the units in a building to be 60% affordable rent, that will start to have a major impact on the issue of affordability, because the problem with many of these programs of private landlords is 80% of CMHC, and we know what that number is, and for many, many people, that's simply unaffordable. And it's almost as if you're familiar with the concept of inclusionary zoning, it's something like inclusionary zoning, where you would give a developer a rezoning in response to them providing certain affordable units. And in this, we're in essence giving them a rebate or a grant from their taxes paid to do the same thing. And so we're achieving something that we decided, or we believe that provincial rules didn't allow us to do, inclusionary zoning. It appears you can only do that if it's in a reference to a transit hub or a transit terminal, and that's a big transit terminal like in Toronto. And so we saw the need in our community as a council. We've taken action, we've amended things. It's been a back and forth between us being the legislative branch and staff being kind of the administrative branch. It's really been a very satisfying process, frankly. It's taken time, but I think the end result is a testament to the hard work of this council, some of the ideas that have come from council members, and of course, some really unique and innovative work by staff. We were asked them to do something that they had not really done before. And we're asking them to do it, and they did it. And so I think this final result, which has taken us several years to get here, frustrating it's taken that long, but the impact of this, although it's taken several years, the impact of this will be decades. And the end result is more affordable units than we'd otherwise see in our community, and growth and development and more people living downtown. So I'm very happy to support it. With that, any other comments? Seeing none, call the vote.
Mayor Davis, are you voting in the affirmative?
Yeah, my iPad's still not working properly. I'll
Okay.
use that as an excuse, but yes, it's in the affirmative. Thanks.
Thank you. Item 5.1 Downtown Community Improvement Plan is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelts, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
All right, we'll move then to the second item on our agenda, something actually quite similar, but in a different area of the city. And that's the Greyfields Community Improvement Plan. And so I would ask, this again is it's an application being made by the city for a similar type of program that we've just heard about, but applicable to different parts of the city. So staff, if you would please, I assume it's the same staff. So you again, Victoria.
Me again.
Got another presentation to make to us.
Through Mr. Mayor, so now I will present on the proposed Greyfields Community Improvement Plan. Next slide, please. So a proposed Greyfield CIP was also considered by Council in February of this year, which was focused on addressing the obstacles to revitalizing Greyfield sites. So Greyfields are previously developed commercial sites that are either vacant or underutilized and or in a state of neglect or disrepair. So the CIP included 3 grant programs, property tax increment-based grant, a TIG, a commercial facade, landscaping and connectivity improvement grant, and a mixed-use building improvement grant. And in February, like with the downtown CIP, Council referred the Greyfield CIP back to staff to consider how incentives for affordable housing could be incorporated into the TIG program in the CIP. Next slide, please. So in accordance with Council's direction, the TIG program has been revised, so it is now structured with the 3 streams to provide enhanced grants for projects that include affordable housing units. And this is the same structure that is proposed for the TIG in the downtown CIP. Next slide, please. So the community improvement project area, again, that's the area where the grant programs would apply, is proposed to consist of the 5 target grayfield revitalization areas shown here. The boundaries of these target areas are limited to land zoned for commercial uses that are located along various intensification corridors and major and minor arterial roads throughout the built-up area of the city. In February, a larger project area aligned with the entire built-up area of the city was proposed to be the applicable area for just that TIG program. However, in accordance with Council's direction from February, it has been reduced in the current version of the CIP to focus on these 5 target areas only. And these target areas were identified after completing a citywide inventory of grayfield sites, and they delineate the areas where we saw clusters of grayfields and other sites considered to be at risk of becoming grayfields. So these are the areas that are considered to be most in need of financial support to facilitate revitalization. Vacant and underutilized grayfield sites can really be detrimental to a community, discouraging investment and commercial activity on surrounding sites. So intervention by the municipality through incentive programs is a way to catalyze positive change in these areas where we see clusters of grayfields. And in addition, these target areas are all located within the city's built-up area, and their revitalization will be useful to support intensification in the built-up area and assist the city in meeting our growth management objectives and the density targets for these areas. So I will now get into the details of each of the financial incentive programs. So next slide, please. So the proposed TIG program is intended to promote the transformative redevelopment of grayfield sites into new mixed-use developments with both commercial and residential units. And as with the TIG in the downtown CIP, the redevelopment must result in an increase in a property's assessed value. So property taxes have to go up after the development is completed, which again is used to offset the financial impact to the city of providing tax rebates through this program. And this program would apply to sites throughout the project area, those 5 target areas, which meet the criteria to be classified as grayfield sites. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned previously, in the current version of the CIP that's before council tonight, the TIG is structured to provide grants through one of 3 streams applicable to the type of development. And again, these streams are structured in the same way as the TIG program in the downtown CIP. So the first stream is for revitalization projects with no affordable units, and that's eligible for the base grant. Next slide, please. The second stream is for affordable housing revitalization projects tier 1, and that's eligible for an enhanced grant. Next slide, please. And then the final stream is affordable housing revitalization projects tier 2, and that's eligible for the further enhanced grant. So the greatest grant is provided through this stream. Next slide, please. The next incentive program is the Commercial Facade Landscaping and Connectivity Improvement Grant. And this grant is aiming to support the ongoing use of existing commercial and mixed use buildings as opposed to new buildings. So it's intended to support improvements to the commercial facade. So it's something like the installation of an accessible door, to support adding hard landscaping or site amenities like an outdoor patio or bicycle parking, or to support the pedestrian connectivity, so like installing a walkway from the sidewalk to the front door. So all properties located within those target areas would be eligible for the program. Next slide. And it's proposed that the maximum grant for this incentive would be up to $15,000 or 50% of the total eligible cost, whichever is lesser. And administration of this grant would require council to allocate funds to a reserve for the payment of grants. And as I'll mention in more detail later, it could be initiated as a subsequent phase of the CIP. Next slide. And then the final grant program is the Mixed Use Building Improvement Grant. And this is also focused on improving existing buildings. So it's intended to support the conversion of buildings into mixed use buildings with both commercial and residential uses. So this might be converting residential units on the ground floor to commercial units, or converting commercial or vacant units in upper stories to residential units. And it's also applicable to all properties in those 5 target areas. Next slide. So the proposed maximum grant would be up to $10,000 per unit that is converted, up to a maximum for the entire property of $30,000 or 50% of eligible costs, whichever is lesser. And administration of this grant would also require council to allocate funds to a reserve for the payment of grants, so it could also be initiated as a subsequent phase of the CIP. Next slide. So staff has also prepared an implementation plan, which covers many of the same items included in the downtown CIP implementation plan. So it outlines that planning staff will be responsible for administering the grant programs, and council will be the approval authority for each application. It includes the same types of marketing and monitoring strategies. And as with the downtown CIP, staff will report back to council with the results of the ongoing monitoring. In addition, the implementation plan includes a phasing strategy for implementing the 3 grant programs. So planning staff is recommending that the property tax increment-based grant program be initiated as the first phase, since capital funding is not required for its operation. And it also has the greatest potential to really stimulate positive change with transformative projects. So this program would be the only program available initially, and it would begin upon receipt of final approval of the CIP. Staff recommends that the 2 capital funded grant programs, so that's the commercial facade, landscaping and connectivity grant, and the mixed use building improvement grant, that those programs would not begin until after the TIG program has been in operation for 1 year. So to offer these programs, council would need to allocate a budget to fund them. So it's recommended that staff would be reporting back to council in 2022 to present a budget for council's consideration. Next slide. So in conclusion, planning staff is of the opinion that supporting the revitalization of grayfield sites through the proposed grant programs is an efficient way to accommodate new growth in the city's built-up area and achieve intensification goals, while also encouraging the provision of affordable housing, promoting economic development, and ultimately helping to generate positive change within these target areas. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Grayfield CIP be adopted, and that the target Grayfield revitalization areas be designated as the community improvement project area. Finally, as I mentioned previously, it is recommended that the TIG program be the only program available initially, and we're anticipating being able to receive applications to that program in early August 2021 if the CIP is approved. And then, as I mentioned, staff would report back to council in 2022 to consider a budget to administer the other 2 grant programs. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Victoria. So, questions, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Victoria. The community improvement areas that are outlined in this report, in conjunction with the previous report, does that cover all the grayfields in Brantford?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, grayfields are found throughout the city, but it covers the areas where we see clusters of grayfields and other sites sort of considered to be at risk of becoming grayfields.
Okay, would the areas that are not within a community improvement plan not benefit from having grayfields in their areas cleaned up and fixed up?
Through the chair, certainly they would benefit from that. In accordance with council's direction from February, we are focusing the CIP was amended to focus on those target areas. It is a way to target municipal investment to the areas that are most in need, which can generate that positive change in those specific areas.
Okay, and if we didn't do the community improvement plan, any kind of tax rebate would be considered bonusing, would it not?
That's correct.
Okay, so I believe that's all my questions for now. Thanks.
Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Victoria, when I look at the map, I see things that I think have already taken place. It would appear to me that the old Canadian Tire, as we call it, on Coburn Street, is identified, I believe, if I'm reading this map correctly, as being eligible, but it's already in the process of being developed. So am I correct there? Am I reading your map correctly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the old Canadian Tire site is included. It has gone through a development approvals process. I know it has a zoning bylaw amendment, but I don't believe construction has been started on this site. So when we identified the target areas, we were looking at gray fields, but we were also, looking at a logical boundary for a site and including all of the properties within that area that do that have commercial zoning. In order to qualify for the TIG program, they do need to meet the criteria for it to be classified as a gray field. So it has to, be vacant and or underutilized. They have to be able to demonstrate that in order to be qualified for the TIG program.
Right. So in other words, that wouldn't qualify for this program then because it's already underway. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe construction hasn't started. I don't believe they have final site plan approval yet. There's certainly, development in the works and they're going through their process, but I don't think any development has started. So it could be eligible for the program.
Okay, and then when I look in West Brant, there's a large block that I believe includes the No Frills, the new dollar store over there, and the Dairy Queen. Again, that's fully developed, but it's showing here that's been long built 2 or 3 years ago. So I would think that's probably not eligible for anything either. Am I correct there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so those sites would be eligible if for intensified development. Sometimes there's large parking areas that can accommodate additional uses. In addition, the target areas are applying to all 3 of the programs. So a site like that is already developed could be eligible for the commercial facade grant or the mixed use building improvement grants that are intended to support improvements to existing buildings.
Okay. And just one final, if I could, Mr. Mayor. There's a large parcel, which I believe was the former Stelco property on the Bend, what I call the Bend in West Brant. Not far from where I grew up, actually, but that whole property there has been sitting. I'm not sure whether it's cleaned up or not cleaned up, but that would qualify for this, if I'm reading it correct.
Through Mr. Mayor, so that property may have qualified through the brownfields redevelopment program. It could also be eligible for this program, but there would be no duplication of eligible costs. So any costs that were included in the brownfields program would not be covered through this program. But if it doesn't have a development on it yet, it's something that could be eligible for that TIG program in this CIP.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Victoria. Victoria, if there's no or very little uptake in the identified areas, nobody wants to do the facade upgrades or walkability upgrades, and we go through a certain amount of time where there doesn't seem to be too much interest in it. Do you then reevaluate different commercial areas in the city and provide the options for the ones that are in greater need? Is that part of our process overall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we will be monitoring the implementation of these programs, their success, and reporting back to council regularly. And if programs aren't successful, we will certainly be recommending, either changes to those programs, changes to the areas based on, needs and the changing environment in different areas. That's certainly something that we will continue to monitor and report to council. And, it's also something I know council will be aware of. And if there is an area that is in need, that's we would, expect to consider either changing this program or establishing a new program for that area. But that would be something down in the future that we would take a look at.
And how far in the future do you think, Victoria? Would it be a 5-year trial to see how well this does? And if there's a diminishing return on it, then we reevaluate at that point? Or is it a 10-year? Is it a 3-year? What are we looking at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for the TIG program specifically, with the recommendation is that we would report back in 2024. That gives us a 2 or so years to implement the program and get some, be able to do an assessment on whether or not it's been effective. With the other grant programs, we are recommending to report back to council in next year in 2022 with a budget. And at that time, I think we could establish a future report date once, if those programs are in effect and we have a budget for it. But a 5-year timeline certainly seems reasonable.
Right. And additionally, Mr. Mayor, our AODA standards that we must comply with it's 2024, if I think I'm correct. Will those pedestrian and accessibility options be available well prior to our deadlines, so that we can show that we're actually trying to accommodate the needs of people who would be using these commercial buildings for whatever their needs or purposes are? That I understand that rollout will be second or third. What's the timeline on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so if council approves a budget next year, then those we would be able to accept grant applications for that. So we would expect to see those improvements relatively quickly. They are smaller scale improvements. So I would expect to see those in the next few years if a budget is approved to implement those programs.
Okay, but it's incumbent on it approving the budget and then Q3, Q4 next year.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria. Again, well done. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So not seeing any other questions. So this would be that portion of the public hearing where members of the public, if they had registered, could speak either for or against this application. And staff, if you would just confirm, I don't believe we have anyone that's registered to speak to this particular item.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, well, then it goes back to staff being the presenter applicant. I assume there's probably nothing more you want to say.
Through you, nothing further to add.
All right, but you are available to answer any further questions. Any questions? Saying none. All right, well, that concludes the public hearing in this particular matter. So now let's get the motion on the floor, or resolution, so we can discuss it. So, Councillor. All right, who's got this? Who's got to read it?
So Vanderstel has it.
Yep. Okay,
Yes,
Councillor Vanderstel, you got it.
Gotcha.
I think Councillor Carpenter wants. I think Councillor Carpenter wants to second it.
Oh, okay. Yep, sure, absolutely. Moved by myself, seeking a Carpenter seconder, if that works. That report 2021-370 titled Greyfields Community Improvement Plan be received, and B, that the target Greyfield revitalization areas as shown in Appendix C of Report 2021-370 be designated as the Greyfields Community Improvement Project Area, and C, that the necessary implementing bylaw to designate a community improvement project area be presented to council for adoption, and D, that the Greyfields Community Improvement Plan attached as Appendix A to Report 2021-370 be adopted, and E, that the necessary implementing bylaw to adopt the Greyfields Community Improvement Plan be presented to council for adoption, and F, that pursuant to 1723, the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CPU 13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to this planning matter. And that Greyfield CIP implementation plan attached as Appendix B to Report 2021-370 to guide the administration of the Greyfields Community Improvement Plan, including ongoing monitoring, be received. And H, that in accordance with the implementation plan, staff be directed to offer the property tax increment-based grant beginning in 2021 after the CIP is adopted, and I, that in accordance with the implementation plan, staff be directed to report to council in 2022 to present a budget for the administration of the commercial facade, landscaping, and connectivity improvement grant and the mixed-use building improvement grant for council's consideration, and J, that staff be directed to report back to council by early 2024 with an assessment of uptake and related impacts of the property tax increment-based grant program following the initial 2 years of program administration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, and Councillor Carpenter, you just confirm you're seconding that? Yeah, all right. All right, so floor is open for discussion. Councillor Wall.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. I mean, it's very fitting that this comes right after the last item that we just passed, so I'll make sure to stay on this. But essentially, all I wanted to say was how thankful I am to the staff and to this council for supporting this initiative. As cliche as it may sound, we have come a long way from where we were to where we are, and we still have a long way to go. But it's items like this that come before this council that get us to where we want to be, and to identify areas of town that need a little bit of love, a little bit of attention, and to encourage creative ways to encourage growth there that aren't just going to cost the taxpayer money and are hopefully going to put more tax dollars into our coffers so that we can continue to have beautiful parks and paved roads and rainbow crosswalks and all sorts of other great things, including affordable housing and support services through our incredible social services department. It's initiatives like this that a growing city just absolutely need to support. And this is amazing. I'm just genuinely overwhelmed at how awesome this community is, our staff and the initiatives that we get to work on and things that we get to do. And this is exactly why I wanted to be on this council. So thank you to everybody involved in it. I can't wait to vote.
Councillor Carpenter, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just can't leave this without saying thank you to former mayor and MPP and Councillor David Newman, who really started off the Grayfield Committee 2 councils ago to look at what we could do to enhance and support the Grayfield properties in our community that were decaying. And at the end, this is the end result of that, and the successive councils following on that, the staff following on the information that they gathered. So I just can't let this go without thanking former Councillor Dave Newman for his leadership here. Thank you.
Yes, very appropriate, Councillor Carpenter. So, Councillor Mark.
Thank you. I'd like to try an amendment seeking a seconder that I be changed to the staff be directed to cancel the commercial facade landscaping and connectivity improvement grant and the mixed-use building improvement grant. Seeking a seconder. I see Councillor McCurry.
Yes, I believe Councillor McCurry is seconding that. All right.
Just the reason for
discussion on the amendment.
The reason for this amendment, I feel, is that this community improvement grant setup will reduce the need for the other grants. This one has no cost because it's tax incremental, and I think this cleans it up and allows staff to concentrate on the one tax incentive grant program, and I think this will be an improvement to this resolution.
So, any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Van Tilburg.
Can the amendment be restated again? I'm a bit confused. Sorry about that. I just want to know what the difference is.
Essentially, the amendment is canceling the other 2 capital-based funding options.
Yeah, I think Councillor Van Tilburg
Okay.
essentially amounts to eliminating I.
Thank you.
So, any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just curious about, could we maybe get some information about what that account, that the reserve that's being used for this program that Councilor Martin is speaking of, what amounts in it, what's been done with it? Has it been used? Is it being utilized? Could we have that information for council, please? I think at face value, this sounds like a great idea, but it's tough to make a quick decision like right now without having a bit more details.
Through Mr. Mayor, so this program isn't currently offered. So the recommendation is that the TIG program would be offered initially, and then staff would report back to council in 2022 for consideration of a budget to implement those programs. So if the CIP is approved as is, all 3 programs will be included. We will only be able to offer the TIG program unless council allocates a budget for those 2 programs.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any raised hands. So take the vote, please, on the amendment. Yeah, staff still having a problem. I'm voting in the negative.
Thank you. The amendment has failed on a recorded vote of 2 to 9. Those in favor, Councillors Martin and McCurry. Those against, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, Utley, and Weaver.
Councillor Martin, to the main amendment or to the main resolution, or?
Yes, to the resolution. The problem I have with this is we're creating winners and losers. We've designated areas that staff have admitted don't include all our gray fields. It includes some of our gray fields. So some owners of gray fields can get assistance from the city and others cannot. And that's just absolutely wrong. If it wasn't for the fact that part of this involves a community improvement program, it would also be illegal. It would be bonusing, and it's against the municipal act from the province. So for those reasons, I can't support this program going forward. When it was originally brought through by staff, they included all of the city outside of the urban growth center, which was covered on the previous resolution. Unfortunately, I think council ruined this resolution when they changed that area and concentrated on certain areas that don't include all the gray fields. So I think the business of picking winners and losers is a mug's game, and it's the taxpayers that lose. So I won't be supporting the resolution.
All right, other speakers, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Why were the broader Grayfield areas not included?
Through Mr. Mayor, so in February, staff did propose a larger project area that would be applicable to the TIG program specifically. So it included the entire built up area with the exclusion of the UGC, since that's covered through the downtown CIP. Council did decide to focus on the target areas because those areas are considered to be the most in need. So there certainly can be gray fields throughout the city, but it was council's decision to focus on those target areas.
That's what I thought. It was council's decision. So can a motion, can a motion be put forward to change it, or would that change your numbers completely? If I were to put forward a motion to say to include all those grayfield areas that were done, or is that not possible under what we've just done? Am I kind of doing?
Through Mr. Mayor, it would basically reverse council's decision from February. So we would need to change the project area to encompass the built up area and make associated amendments in the CIP that would limit the TIG program, or sorry, limit the other programs.
The reason I asked this is because it was taken out, then it went to you, then you've come back with us with some changes. And I'm wondering now, seeing the changes, can we put the areas in that were excluded?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you can go back to the way that it was. And I think your question is, are you going to affect the changes to the TIG program that we've made? And no, that wouldn't be the case. So you could change
Okay,
the
I put a motion to include the previous grayfield areas that were listed. My view is a grayfield is a grayfield is a grayfield, and we were looking to get something in the broader areas. So, I mean, that's the point of dealing with grayfields. Otherwise, they just sit there. And there's no need in having them sit there for 10 and 20 years for us to say, oh, we should have done something about it. We have a program that we can implement now. So seeking a seconder to Councillor Martin has agreed to second the amendment.
So we have an amendment which specifically, Councillor Van Tilburg, it's to amend the
to amend
qualifying grayfield areas to what?
To what they were in the previous report.
Right.
That were listed previously.
Okay. All righty. And so it's on the floor. It's been seconded. Councillor Wall to the amendment.
All right, so I tried to catch that, and I think I can support it, but I need some clarification here from staff. What exactly does that, based on what Councillor Van Tilburg has moved and Councillor Martin has seconded, what does that mean to you and to what we're voting on here tonight, and how will that impact? What are the ramifications of this, I guess, is my question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we will be needing to amend the CIP to reflect those changes in the project area. So the majority of the CIP will remain the same, but we will need to change the mapping that's in the CIP and some text in certain areas. It will result in more properties being eligible for the program, which again, it does have a financial impact to the city to provide these grants, even though they are provided as tax rebates. It is foregone tax revenue for the city, so there will be impacts in that way.
But if I'm not mistaken, and I know that I'm no expert by any means in these matters, by providing this incentive, the goal ultimately at the end is for it to ultimately in the future more than pay itself back. Yes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Then, sorry, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there any reason I shouldn't support this from staff's perspective?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff did propose a larger project area initially to consider, grayfield sites that we do know are scattered throughout the built-up area. It was council's desire to reduce this project area to just the areas that are most in need, and I can see the merit in focusing on the areas that are most in need. But certainly it can go the other way as well, and there can be benefit in that way too.
I see you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Just, through the mayor to Councillor Wall, just add to what Victoria has been saying. Certainly we can change the area back to what we had proposed it to be back in February. There's the two programs that we've really just set the table with in the community improvement plan, but we still need to report back to you with a budget for those. So obviously, depending on the size of the area in which those programs could be eligible may impact, what we come back with in terms of a budget ask. Or it might mean that, whatever amount that gets approved for that budget potentially has to be applied over a greater area as opposed to focusing it down into the what were the target areas that we've resulted in the CIP area boundary before you tonight. So it's doable.
Gosh, am I ever thankful that we have you guys. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Carpenter.
Just the staff, we're going to review this program in 2022, and the funding will be requested for that budget year for the program. At that time, we can make changes, could we not?
Through Mr. Mayor, so the report back in 2022 is specifically to consider the capital funded grant programs. Those were always proposed just to apply to the target areas. We will be reporting back in 2024, and that will be specific to the TIG program and its success. So you could consider in 2024 an amendment to the project area at that time.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I did hear staff say that if we applied it to the whole city, that the application for funding in 2022 would be significantly more Is that correct?
Through the mayor, so I believe that the intent of the amendment is just for the TIG program to apply the TIG program across the city. So the funding that would be needed for the other grant programs would just apply to the target areas.
Okay, so it's the TIG program for the whole city was the tax incentive program. Okay, just a question. Since council moves this, council to bring this, to take this out, is this not a motion to reconsider council's previous decision? Question for the clerk.
Through the chair, in regards to this, the previous, there were amendments that occurred at Committee of the Whole Community Development on the original plan, and then it was actually deferred direct to City Council and then referred back to staff. So in regards to this, it would not be a reconsideration because it's an amendment at the stat hearing as well as an amendment on a referred back recommendation. So technically what you were approving in February was referred back. There was no final say in regards to that. So it's not a reconsideration.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Victoria again. You're on the hot seat tonight. How much will this set your timelines back when you rejig the numbers, rejig the space, rejig the language? When might you be able to report back with this?
Through Mr. Mayor, we can make this, like if you pass this amendment, it could be approved at council.
Okay.
At the following council, yeah.
And to follow up on the next obvious question that originated with Councillor McCreary, I guess this would be to Nicole Willmott, if she's still here with us. If we extend our Grayfield program to include all of the properties in the city of Brantford, and we are subjected to a deluge of requests, do we have enough staff to deal with that amount of inquiries and applications?
Through the mayor to the councillor, as I noted previously, at the current time, we anticipate that with our current staff complement, we can manage the administration of this program. However, when we do report back, and we are planning to report back on those two programs in 2022, if there is an increase that's significantly impacting our capacity, then we can report back at that time. But it is likely that if these programs are administered across the entire city and we're receiving multiple applications, that may result in some increased resources being required in order to get these projects out the door, because as we know, there are always timelines associated with construction.
Nicole, that sounded like almost the same answer, but thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Sluss, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want clarity. I think the resolution is to put the area back to where it was when it originally came to us in February. And I just want to confirm, did that mean the whole city?
So through the mayor to the councillor, it refers to the built up area of the city, excluding the area that is proposed through the downtown CIP. So there is no overlap between those two areas.
Right. So for all intents and purposes, it's the whole city minus the core area.
That's correct. The city, as we know it built up today, it does not include our new greenfield areas. So that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't feel at all comfortable making changes on the fly like this, and I'm not going to support any amendments, but I will support the presentation that's before us. I think there are other opportunities in the future to make changes or additions next year or the year after, but I'm not comfortable doing that this evening. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Van Tilburg for bringing this forward. This is correcting a mistake that we made last time by voting something on the fly that was not appropriate. reduce the areas down to specific targeted areas that excludes other gray fields. And as the mover stated, a gray field is a gray field. Doesn't matter where it is. We need to get them cleaned up. I'm surprised that people are asking staff if this is going to cause a problem, or if they have a problem with this. This is what they recommended in the first place. So please consider that. And there is no hardship to staff. There is no increased cost because it's a tax incentive program. It's funded by the increase in the taxes. And if the gray fields don't get cleaned up, there is no increase in the taxes. So if it's good for some areas of the city, it's good for the whole city. And I hope this resolution carries, this amendment. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, just the staff, would this qualify for the 2 new apartment buildings already scheduled for King George Road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure of the specific apartment buildings, but in order to qualify for this program, they would have to, first of all, the site would need to be classified as a gray field. The criteria includes that it must be vacant or underutilized, that sort of thing. And it also must be a mixed-use building. So if it's a standalone apartment building, it wouldn't meet the requirements. But if it does include commercial units on the ground floor, it would be eligible. And again, it's not intended to incentivize developments that have already occurred. So if these are, proposals just at this stage, then they would be eligible. But if there's construction already happened, then no, they would not be eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question for staff. So what would be a gray field? Like, we have the advantage tonight of seeing the properties that qualify. What would the criteria be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the criteria are included in the CIP. In order to be classified as a gray field, they must, let me just pull it up here so I don't misspeak. To be classified as a gray field, they must be a former or existing commercial or mixed-use building. And that the site or building must be vacant, or there be clear signs of vacancy, or that the building is at risk of becoming vacant. So the majority of space is unoccupied. The site exhibits some degree of neglect, which could range from derelict or abandoned buildings at a relative lack of regular maintenance, or there's a reason to believe that the building is in a poor state of repair, or the site is characterized by a significant amount of vacant space or underutilized parking areas. So it needs to meet one of those criteria in order to be classified as a gray field. So that criteria is broad. So there are sites, with vacant buildings that would be classified, or sometimes we see sites that have large parking areas that aren't needed for the use. Those could be classified as gray fields.
Can you give us some examples? Because the area that's in here right now, I think we all understand. Yeah, that say, I won't name any streets, but the ones that are in here, I think we understand that area. So yeah, that's kind of a gray field area. I see it, I get it. That looks like a gray field area. But if we're out, let's say on Linden Road or King George Road or whatever, like some other streets. So can you give us some examples of what would qualify and what wouldn't?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the one that came up in February was the former Game Time restaurant on King George Road. So that's a vacant building that would be eligible, assuming the project area applied to that site, it would meet the criteria and would have been eligible for this program. And I know that some of the discussion around council there is, that area is quite different than some of the target areas. And I think that sort of prompted council to make that amendment.
I guess the bottom line would be, yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it was. But the bottom line is every application is unique. And just because it might qualify doesn't mean the council will approve it.
That's correct.
Those are my questions. So any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Take the vote, please. Yeah, staff, my iPad is still disabled, so I think I'm gonna need IT's help, but yeah, about the affirmative.
I'm just waiting on Councillor Utley. Believe he's still here.
He wasn't in front of his camera when the question was.
The amendment carries on a recorded vote of 9-2. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver. Those against, Councillor Sless and Carpenter.
Okay, so it's been amended now. Any discussion as amended? Seeing none. You could take the vote, please, and again, put me down for affirmative.
Item 5.2 as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Mr. Mayor, could you, through you to the clerk, could I have my vote changed for the amendment from yes to no, please?
On the amendment motion?
Yeah, I just had to leave my desk for a few minutes, and I wasn't sure what we were voting on. So if you could change my vote for the amendment to no from yes.
Thank you. I've recorded that.
Thank you.
All right, that completes the statutory hearing portion. So I'll now hand the chair back to Councillor Weaver to complete the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at this point of the meeting, we are at delegations. There are no delegations scheduled for tonight. So item 7 is items for consent and consideration. So we'll now consider those items that have been separated. So Councillor Sless, please read the motion to place all separated items for consideration and consent not previously voted on the floor, and please state your seconder.
Yes, Mr. Chair, moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Utley, that all items for consideration or consent, items 7.1 and 7.2, separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
Thank you. I believe that's 7.11 and 7.12, as the minutes are 7.21 and they've already been approved. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that would be correct for Councillor Sless.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Sless. And who was your seconder again?
Councillor Utley.
Thank you. So item 7.1.1 was separated by Councillor Van Tilburg. So I believe we can, that's on the floor. Actually, sorry, do we need to separate to vote to put it on the floor first? So I will call that vote.
Sorry, through the chair, you just do the separate vote in regards to the item itself. So you already got them on the floor.
Individually? Okay, thank you, Julia. So 7.1.1 is the Digital Communications AODA Compliance Action Plan, and that was separated by Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, I was looking through it, and it's quite thick. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do, a lot of work to be done, and a lot of work to be done. And so what I would like for the short answer, so that anyone watching that may be following under the AODA interest for how they access council and our city's initiatives, just what if you could just kind of express the steps that we're going through and how we're going to get there and what are timelines on it, basically what is in the report, but a very short synopsis, and then explain to me how people engaging in this right now would get that information.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Maria Vasaki, Director of Communications and Community Engagement. Through you, Chair Weaver, I do appreciate the question, Councillor Van Tilburg, so that we can explain further to the viewing public exactly what steps the city plans to take to ensure that we are 100% compliant with the current AODA standards. So as you mentioned, it is an exhaustive report. It's very comprehensive. It took staff a couple of months to do the research to put it together, but I will do my best to summarize it in plain language. Basically, there was a deadline on January 1st, 2021 that stipulated a ministry, a provincial deadline, an AODA deadline milestone, whereby every municipality was required to have 100% compliance on their digital properties, primarily their websites. The City of Brantford website is mostly compliant. Our HTML content, HTML is the actual pages. So when you're looking through pages on a site, that's what we refer to HTML. That is currently compliant. So all the pages that people are scrolling through can be read easily by an assistive device. Where we're currently falling short is on our links to PDF documents. So as council is aware, the city produces a lot of PDF documents. We do a lot of business. A lot of plans are presented to council in a PDF format. The difference between a PDF and HTML content is that a PDF, once it's up there on a website, it cannot be altered. And obviously HTML content can. So what the city needs to do is we need to scan every single PDF document that is currently on the website to understand and inventory, one, whether or not the PDF document absolutely needs to reside on the website, and two, if it does, it needs to be remediated so that it is in an accessible format. I do want to reiterate to council and to communicate to the public that this is something that has been a priority for the city's communications department, as well as our municipal accessibility coordinator staff person who did a lot of the research that informed this report. It has been a priority. We have already conducted an initial training session with staff, and it was our intention to follow up that training again in 2020. The trainings involved, especially when you're working with PDF files that include tables and images and maps that require special formatting. They need alt tags, they need footnotes and captions. And again, I want to reiterate that all of the pages on the city's website, the HTML content, anything that contains imagery is accessible. It's alt tagged. Our website framework does not allow us to post an image on the city's websites unless it includes an alt tag. So that is actually built into the framework. We cannot post an image if it is not posted in an accessible format. PDFs are created by staff all over the organization. There's hundreds and hundreds of report writers. There are hundreds and hundreds of projects that are currently underway. We work with a number of vendors, consultants who provide these plans to the city in a PDF format. I will say that there are a number of consultants who regularly work with municipal partners who absolutely understand the requirements of them under AODA. Our purchasing policy now also stipulates that any document that is provided to the city by a consultant has to be provided in a remediated, accessible format. So that is a requirement that has now been built into all of the city's RFPs. And that has been underway for months now. Again, the documents that are on the site, we've done some initial scans, again, to inform this report. There are hundreds of PDFs that are on the site that have not been remediated, and most of them are dated, and they certainly predate the policy of us including that requirement in our RFP process. So the steps that we're taking is we're putting together a training program for staff. The first thing we have to do is make sure that anything that gets posted to the site from now on is already remediated. It's already in an accessible format, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we need to go through this exercise again. Secondly, we need to work with specialty vendors who have expertise in software that is specifically designed to scan PDFs on websites. That will help us identify every single document quickly, and then do an assessment of which need to stay. And if they do need to stay, then they need to be remediated. We also need to work with a vendor to actually do that remediation. There's one person in the city of Brantford right now who has been fully trained to do remediation of documents. And it's not feasible for her to be able to do all of that in time to meet the auditing deadline of December 31st, 2021. So the plan is to work with purchasing to put out RFQs in order to partner with specialized vendors that can help us implement this action plan.
Thank you very much, Maria. Councillor, you're very much over your time. Did you have any other questions? I don't see any other speakers, so I can allow you to go again if you like.
And that was the short answer. So could I have the long version? No, just, that's the thing. It's a daunting task. And one thing I would like to ask, is there a type of software that can automatically convert source it and just convert it into a format that we need? Is that technology out there being developed, being considered? Because I would imagine we're not the only municipality with this problem.
Through the chair to the councillor, you're absolutely correct. Based on our research, every other municipality is in a very similar situation to the city. Through our research, we did not find any software that makes a document conversion ready. It's very specialized, and it's very specific to the content that's in every document. So that software does not exist. Whether or not it's being developed, that's a really good question. I know our accessibility coordinator is in the Zoom room now. So if she knows, she can certainly add her 2 cents. But as far as I know, that technology does not currently exist.
Hi, Maria, it's Jenny Sawicki here. There is software that will do the majority of the work, but there is always the need for a human eye on that software to do the final check on the document, because it often does result in false positives or false negatives, whichever the case may be. So there's software that will get us part way there, but we always need a human touch as well. And as far as software being further developed, they're always working on it, but it's doubtful that it will ever be 100%.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Jenny and Maria. I don't have any other questions, so I will call the vote.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, my iPad is still disabled, so. Vote in the affirmative.
Thank you.
Vote in the affirmative.
Item 7.1.1, Digital Communications AODA Compliance Action Plan is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelts, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Thank you for that, Julia. The next item is 7.1.2, which is a development application process review update. And that item has been separated by Councilor Carpenter. Councilor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the staff, looking at page 77 of the KPMG report, one of the items was complete a review of the city's site plan process to identify opportunities to streamline and simplify the process and update the site alteration permit process and bylaw to clarify difference between site plan and site alteration, as currently they are duplications in a lot of areas, especially in small developments, small infill developments. And that's where it was focused on, that we would look at the need where there was a need for a site plan process, considering the site alteration process already has those things in it for small developments of 1, 2, and 3 infill lots. And my understanding from staff that this wouldn't come, or by the report, this wouldn't come forward till October. Can staff comment on that, please?
Good evening, Steve Babcock here, Manager of Corporate Initiatives. Through the chair, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in our site plan process at this point, so I may require some assistance from Nicole, perhaps. What I can say just on a high level is that the phase 2 of this work is the implementation of phase 1. So of the phase 1 recommendation. So this October timeline is basically giving us an opportunity to do that deep dive analysis to understand how to proceed with an implementation. But as far as the detailed information on the site plan, it looks like maybe Heidi might be jumping in here actually to discuss that further.
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Services and Planning. Yes, so I made a previous comment in an email message to Councillor Carpenter that an overall report on implementation of the recommendations would come forward in October. Just to clarify, that does not mean that implementation of an alternative potential site plan process would be available in October. What we're doing right now, as Mr. Babcock just identified, is with a consultant reviewing all of our processes and taking a more holistic corporate view as recommended by the KPMG report before you to ensure that our processes are aligned. I am aware of concerns, especially arising from my previous role with respect to potential duplication of the work under site plan and site alteration. I can say that our processes are meant to be one after the other. So site alteration typically deals with pre-servicing work like grading of a site, for instance, getting in there to prepare the lands, similar to what's happening on the former Canadian Tire site that we heard today. Not full site plan approval necessarily, but you can get on earlier and do some of that pre-grading work and that activity. And then after that work is done, site plan is triggered under an entirely different section under the Planning Act. So the idea is it allows the developer to get in a little bit earlier. I understand that in some cases there's some either confusion or potential duplication of efforts. And so we are absolutely looking at that as part of our overall process improvements. That said, that does not mean our recommendation will perhaps entirely align with what you're hearing from KPMG in this report, which is to do away with site plan entirely in infill developments, because site plan and infill, again, is an important way to ensure that certain development parameters are placed on infill developments, which have fairly significant impacts on existing residential, for instance, residential buildings, where the infill is in a residential zone, particularly single family. And you're seeing that in terms of conformity with neighborhoods. I know that particularly in Ward 3 right now, we see that, and site plan can be an important tool, especially when you have councillors reviewing those and part of that process. So that's my very long-winded answer to a very short question.
It's my time. Probably getting close.
You've got 1 more minute, Councillor.
Okay, good. But that doesn't mean that we can't look for a more efficient process for small infill developments that will still cover up all those things and all those concerns that we're talking about. That doesn't rule that out.
Through the chair, 100%. And I know there was a task force of council to look into that specifically, and certain members of our development community were on that. And now I'm speaking like an auctioneer, so as not to filibuster, but that does not mean that that is the case, and we are alive to those issues.
Okay, and I'll have some more questions. Let me know when I run out, Mr. Chairman, and then you can put it back on the list. The second phase is funded by the Provincial Audit Accountability Fund to the tune of $250,000. I don't remember seeing that come to council. Did that come to council for approval?
Through the chair, it came to council by way of a memo. Is information that we were successful in receiving funding through the Audit and Accountability Fund, and also came through the budget estimates process as well. There was an ask, unmet need ask for an intermediate planner and a project manager that we were able to fulfill through this funding.
Okay, you've tweaked my memory now, and then that was withdrawn because we were putting an application in. Okay, and then that was funded. I think that was funded at the last minute budgets. Then wasn't that?
You're exactly right. It was a very last minute ask, and we were successful in receiving the funding, and so the need was removed at that point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Yep, a few more questions. Put me back on the list, please. Thank you.
I will do so, sir. Councillor Utley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. First, thank you for the report. It's quite thorough and something that's very near and dear to my heart. So with 40 recommendations, 12 are completed, 28 to go. Are we confident we'll complete the remainder of the 40 recommendations by Q4 this year?
Through the chair, confident that we will fulfill them all by the end of this calendar year. I can't say that I'm confident that we will fulfill them all. Some of them are fairly significant projects on their own, and some of them have actually are more corporate initiatives. The other thing that I will add to that is the second phase of this work is a much deeper dive, and it's also we're going to be identifying more recommendations through that work as well. So this phase of this work is about implementation of the first phase, but also doing that double check and identifying any other recommendations that may be needed as well. So the second phase work is really focused on that technology component, making sure that we are digital from end to end. And in order for that to be successful, we need to make sure that we have a well-run, efficient, and effective process. We do not want to digitize a process that doesn't operate well. So that's really a key piece to this work, is doing a deep dive in the process, understanding what our pain points are, fixing those pain points so that we can fully digitize.
Thanks, Steve. I've got a few more questions, Mr. Chair. The second question I had is number one. There are, I think, 12 points in the analysis on page 4 and 5 on the report. What is number 2 is develop a continuous improvement program. And it's got want to complete it by Q4 2021. And again, that's something that I think is very important for the organization. How's that going?
That through the chair, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So we are having discussions on what a continuous improvement program will look like corporately, and that's the reason that we've completed this and removed it from the scope of this work, because it really is a corporate program. So we don't want to implement a number of continuous improvement programs across different departments, because we'll end up with some inconsistencies in how we perform. So there's a couple of different angles that we are looking here. So we have an organizational change management team that is a cross-functional team that meets on a regular basis to discuss and implement corporate culture needs. And so a continuous improvement program is on their hit list. And what we're looking at is a staff-led program, a program where staff can make suggestions for improvement and then see those through to implementation as a potential program. So I'd love to see that in place by the end of this calendar year. I think that would be a really great program for the city. And then the other piece to continuous improvement is making sure that we've got a good methodology in place. So looking at a lean methodology. Where I would say that we are, I'm not going to say we're going to struggle, where I'm going to say we will be delayed with this is that in order for us to implement a good continuous improvement program, we need to have our performance measures in line. We need to have a really good understanding of what it is we're trying to improve. And so we need to focus our efforts on building performance measures, which is an exercise we are going through with this review as well, specifically in the development application process, and using Amanda, our software system, workflow distribution system, to produce data for us so we can build some important performance measures that we can understand how we're performing, and we can build continuous improvement around that.
Thank you. Councillor, your time is up, Councillor. Would you like
Okay.
to on the list?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, please. Yeah. Great answer, Steve. Thank you.
I have Councillor McCreary, first time speaker.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Well, it took 2 iterations for Councillor Utley and I and the committee members to get to where we are today. And there's a lot of people that have made positive contributions to our success in terms of trying to implement a more thorough and effective system with respect to our building and planning departments. So I look forward to finishing this task up. I'm also pleased to have one committee assignment behind us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Carpenter, second time.
Thank you. I think Councilor McCreary forgets I was on the committee from its inception whenever he mentions it, but there was a committee of council. I'm not prepared to disband the committee and then have the work being done by a consultant that we've hired at the cost of $250,000 to do the rest of the work and not come back to committee before it comes back to council for approval. So just having said that, I'd like to know who the members of the DAP steering committee are.
Through the chair, so the members of the DAP steering committee so we've got the director of planning, a manager of planning, director of economic development, director of building services, a Chris Olson manager in IT, and I feel like I'm missing someone. Give me a moment. There's 6 and myself. Just bear with me one moment here. Oh, Gary Peaver, manager of development engineering.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And so Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have a separation of A and B. I can't support B. And there isn't 40 recommendations, there's 45 recommendations because staff added 5 as I see it. And I see 9 are complete on the list that I have printed off. I would just say I can't support B by disbanding the task force. The job's not done until the 40 recommendations plus the 5 of staff have been fully implemented and approved. So to me, our work's not done. And so I can't support item B. I can support item A, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Utley, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Steve. Steve, my next question is about number 4, concierge service. Would that how would that work initially?
Through the chair, that's another great question, and we've been mulling this one over for quite some time, trying to figure out what this concierge service looks like as we transition to the new City Hall. And so the way that this recommendation was written was knowing that in the new City Hall, we've got this brand new, nice looking second floor counter, and we're going to be merging the counters of development engineering, planning and building and bylaw. And so is there an opportunity to have this one point of contact that can handle the customer intake for all of those service areas? Because we know that these services are very interconnected. There's a lot of back and forth that exists. Sometimes you've got a customer that needs to speak to staff in multiple service areas in order to get their application in or to get the information that they need. So we're toying a couple options. One is to offer this concierge service through the second floor counter, which would be that one point of contact. The other option is to deliver the concierge service right at the front door, right at the main entrance, and speak with the customers, gain an understanding of what it is they're looking to accomplish, what brings them into City Hall, and then right on the spot, just make contact with staff that they need to reach out to and book a meeting room with them, perhaps. So we don't have a full plan of attack right now, but those are really the two options that we're toying with.
Thank you, Steve. My thinking around that was, I think the concierge would be ideal for small builders, small contractors, and like first time phase one with the pre-consultation. So I think that's maybe worth exploring where that concierge service can be best used. My next question was the neighborhood agenda template. Can you just briefly explain what that means and who would be involved in it?
I will offer a very high level explanation because that's
okay. Yeah, that's all I want at this time. Yeah, yeah.
So I know that. So through the chair, this was a recommendation that came out of. It's one of the 40 recommendations that this neighborhood template didn't exist. And I understand it's really just about adding some consistency to the process. I know that the template has been created, but of course, neighborhood meetings aren't happening the way that they would through COVID. So this template is something that will be utilized, but I'm not sure if that fully answers your question.
It does. So I wasn't exactly sure what the title meant, but you've clarified that really well. Other question is MS Office upgrade. What's involved in upgrade and why?
This is another, through the chair, this is another one of those recommendations that really can't be done in isolation of one department or one service area. It's a corporate need for this upgrade. And obviously, I think we're using Office, I think it's 2010 we're using right now. So there's clearly an opportunity there's obviously enhancements that come with the new technology. So I know that's on IT's work plan. I know that there's a plan in place to have that implemented, but it's there on the plan. But once again, it's removed from the scope of this work because it really isn't. It needs to be done at a corporate level, not on a level.
Thank you, Councillor. That was your time. Sorry, Councillor.
Can you add me on for?
You've had 2 speaking opportunities. I'm sorry. There will be another opportunity at council at the end of the month, though.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Only had 5 more.
Sorry, Councillor. So we have a separation request, which is no problem. Just before we go to the votes on those separated items. So the task force that was looking into this. So I see that this report is authored by our CAO, Mr. Hutchinson. So typically with the task force, is there not a chair of the task force, and then typically the report comes forward as a report from the chair, essentially?
Yeah, yes, Councillor Weaver. There's 2 options we debated. We could have the task force get together, much like the accommodations steering committee did with Councillor Utley being the chair, and just come together for one report, which would cancel the task force. That's option 1. Or option 2, we looked at putting it in this. If you look at putting in this report, and rather than saving efficiency and saving people time, we looked at doing that. So we thought we'd be administratively efficient by trying to put it in this report. But as you can see, the task force term of reference on page 3 of this report are complete. And Robert's rules does say that we can do that to recreate the task force or go back and cancel the task force. We thought staff are moving on this and thought that just to end the task force to move this forward.
Okay, so the staff's recommendation is staff's recommendation. Sorry, is that me getting feedback? Sorry, I'm not sure why. So it's staff's recommendation to, we've completed the mandate and to end the task force?
Yes, at the end of the KPMG report, really the mandate of the task force was completed. Now it's the implementation of things. And so we got, as we mentioned earlier, we have funding from the provincial government to do that. And we're going to stage 2 of this. And so that's why we're looking at ending it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a separation of votes. So we'll call the vote on item, I guess it would be, let's see, where is the item? A, I guess would be first.
Yep, as I've done throughout the meeting, Chair, I have to tell you orally what I'm doing. So
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Clause A is approved on a recorded vote of 10-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, and Weaver. Those against, Councillor Utley.
Thank you. I'll call the vote on item B.
Purposely delaying, Mr. Chair. I think that's appropriate since I'm doing this orally, but my vote is yes for this as well.
Thank you.
Clause B carried on a recorded vote of 8-3. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, McCreary, and Weaver. Those against, Councillors Utley, Carpenter, and Van Tilburg.
Thank you. The next item is we are at resolutions, so we're getting there. This item is 8.1, which is the noise bylaw amendment, and that was a deferral from the April 2021 meeting. It was brought forward by Councillor Van Tilburg. Since it was a deferral, it is on the floor and it is ready to be debated. So is there any comments, questions from anyone? Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. I had made notes here. Forgive me. Can I speak after Councilman Tilburg?
You've already engaged in your time, Councillor, so please go ahead.
Sure. Okay. There's 2 speaking opportunities?
There is.
Great. I'll take my second opportunity.
Councilman Tilburg, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually glad to see this had gone out to the public for them to digest and review it. And it came back with a lot of good feedback. And I think there's plenty to benefit from that. The division of what the public thought is pretty much 50-50. It's a little bit one way or the other, and it's question by question and what people's perceptions are. And I think that's relatively accurate of how the public feels on this bylaw. And I think the thing that, me as a person, if I were to see this bylaw as an individual person, I would say, wow, why do we need this? And when I sit here as a counselor and I realize the frustration at times of over a couple of years with no tools to handle a street of people calling to complain consistently about one particular house, and there's nothing that you can do because the tool doesn't exist, and you become very frustrated, and so your hand is forced, and I mean forced to put yourself in these positions somewhere that I don't want to be. And so when I look at the response from the public, and I see that there's people that are worried about the noise and other noise too, which I wish to address at a later time. But with regards to how we see this implemented, is that I think each counselor knows that, like I know in my last term, neither Councillor Newman nor myself were hampered by the kind of noise that I think councillors have endured from one chronic individual here and there that is a nuisance to the community. And so we all know that we're looking for that tool. And so I believe the numbers came back better than I expected, because I thought more people might not understand that what we're trying to do is really deal with a bad apple, a jerk individual within the community. And that is pretty much how we expect this bylaw to be enforced. And so that people didn't get the mismessaging that, you know, you can't have your radio on and things like this. And that we're really targeting the bad few. And we know that bylaw is so busy now that that is all that they would ever be capable of doing. So I know that although just over half the people that have read this that are saying we don't need this and it's not necessary. And I get that, you know, and it shouldn't be necessary. And quite frankly, 99.9% of the public aren't even going to know that this bylaw passed. You're just not, because that is not what any of these councillors are looking for. We're looking for being able to have a tool handy where there's a persistent and chronic problem happening that we can actually address and deal with. So the feedback was phenomenal. There has been a number of things that are outside of this realm, but possibly can be included. And if they're not addressed tonight, I have some that I will bring in between in the next couple of weeks. But I wanted to have the time to talk to the councillors about it to let them know what I was thinking based on the feedback that I received. And I didn't feel it would be right to spring it on people at this time. So that's how I'm going to end my first round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wall, second time.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. I'm sorry about the hiccup there. So I just want to share some stuff from the report. So it says the noise control bylaw public engagement campaign ran on the city's Let's Talk Brantford platform, which was shared on social media from May 12th to the 26th. During the campaign, 613 people visited the project page, 220 people completed the survey, and posts on the city's Facebook page and Instagram. Twitter reached over 30,000 people, garnered 124 comments across all platforms. 113 respondents, 51% supported the bylaw, and 108 respondents, 49% indicated they did not support it. What a coincidence, 51-49. The other thing that I wanted to share was the open-ended survey comments, as well as those received by the city through the social media page, indicated that those in favor of the amendment had had negative experiences associated with disruptive noise levels in the neighborhood, while those opposed to the amendment most often cited that the bylaw would impose upon people's rights to enjoyment of their own property. Others in opposition cited the challenge to enforce the amended bylaw and that enforcement efforts are better focused on more serious offenses. So I'm on the fence about this. I spoke about it when it came the first time. I believe I'm the one who moved the deferral on it. I thank council for seconding it, or whatever, however it got here today. Thank you, council, for supporting it and allowing us to do this public engagement campaign. Feels like we were just here the other day talking about respect with a motion that Councillor McCurry had moved called Project Noisemaker. And I don't understand why we have to have rules like this. I just don't. I don't understand why people just can't respect one another's personal space and that we have to create bylaws like this. And I'm remiss. They say that the burden of leadership is hard, and it's decisions like this that just, we got much bigger problems in this community. So I'm going to move an amendment, if that's okay, Councillor Weaver.
I would like to give everyone an opportunity for a first time speaking first, Councillor.
Fantastic. How much time do I have left?
You have 1 minute and 51 seconds.
Okay, great. All I'll say is that we have a noise bylaw now. I may not entirely be in support of this amendment to the noise bylaw, but to the constituents who have reached out to me who have that neighbor who just seems to not have any respect for their enjoyment of their property, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't even know that if this passes that it will fix the problem, because I don't know. You can't find your way out of bad behavior. Bad behavior has to come through societal change. And I would hope that with the way the world is, you know, literally in the middle of a global pandemic, that people could just sit back, especially those that are choosing to be a nuisance to their neighbors, and just reflect on, you know, is it worth it? Is it worth it to just be making the world miserable for somebody else? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if I had to think we all had a reason to be on this earth, it would be to make the world a better place for everybody, not to be miserable. So just, you know, please, if this bylaw does pass in its form, don't be one of those people who breaches it. Just be respectful of your neighbor, please. And I would love an opportunity to move an amendment when time comes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rentowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting this, and I do understand the arguments on both sides of this. And I think that once this plays out, many of the concerns that are out there now will hopefully, fall to the wayside, because they will find that it's not what they were concerned about. I think most of us have, one or two of these constituents, and in some cases, once they realize we don't have a tool to use, there are some that, put the pedal down harder, and just to prove that they can do what they want to do, and lack concern for their neighbors. And in a perfect world, Councillor Wall is right. Why do we have to do this? But the other example is, all the money we spend on speed bumps and traffic control, and we spend a ton of money on that because of behavior. But when there's enforcement and a fine, I get a ticket, I slow down in that area next time. So it's not the ideal situation. And when we're forced to deal with behavior through these methods, it's unfortunate. If everyone just took responsibility for their own behavior, we'd save the city a lot of money and we'd have much happier neighbors. Unfortunately, that is not the case in some of these situations. So I will support this because I understand the intent of it. I understand that it is not to be a wide-reaching bylaw, but it is a tool to have in a toolkit for some unfortunate circumstances that we need to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just before we go to Councillor Wall for his deferral, I'll use my speaking opportunity. So I intend on voting in favor of this. This was asked to be done from staff. Staff looked at it, they brought it back to council. Council deferred it for a cycle so we could get some more information, and we did a public engagement. We've done that. We've done everything that we said we were going to do. Public engagement came back very close, but it doesn't matter. It's still, that's what we wanted to use to base some of our decision making on. So based on that, and I was planning on supporting it regardless anyway, I'll be supporting this item, and I won't be supporting any amendments or deferrals. And it looks like we have a few more people have come up onto the queue. Sorry, I don't know who went first, so we'll go with Councillor Martin first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see this is back before us. I didn't support the deferral in the first place. I felt this is an important tool that needs to be in the toolbox of our property standards enforcement people so that they can deal with people that just aren't respectful of their neighbors. And that's unfortunate that we have to do that, but it is something that we do have to do. So I certainly won't support any deferral of this. It's been deferred too much as it is. We need to get this in place. Weather's warming up, people are going to want to be enjoying their backyards, and if that's not possible because they have someone next door who makes it impossible for them to enjoy their backyards, I feel that our property standards officers need this tool in their toolbox so that they can hopefully resolve it and allow people to enjoy their own property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Utley, followed by Councillor Vanderstel. Go ahead, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate this coming before us. We're living in a time where life just seems to be getting louder and louder, not just with music, but with cars, with the aftermarket mufflers on, which is, we've got something coming down the pipeline on that. Fireworks going off at times when they should be going off. And it's becoming a real nuisance. So I support this wholeheartedly, but we somehow need to get the wider noise problem under control. And of course, enforcing that noise bylaw will present challenges to us as well. But got to start somewhere. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor Vanderstel, please.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. You're all correct. It's a sad day when we have to specifically target this kind of behavior. But this really is an anti-bullying bylaw. a very specific anti-bullying bylaw that says, specifically, if you're going to majorly impact your neighbors with your behavior because you simply want to do it, and there's no tool that anyone can use against that. If you live with a wanton disregard for anybody who may be sleeping or who have, young children's health issues, whatever it may be, and you intentionally go out of your way repeatedly to make life difficult for people, well, here's your answer. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments before we go to Councillor Wall? Okay, Councillor Wall, did you want to move your deferral still?
No, an amendment.
An amendment? Sorry. Okay, what's that amendment?
Sorry, the amendment is add a clause C that's be directed to report back in the first quarter of 2022 with details on the number of complaints received and fines issued since the implementation of the amended bylaw. Seeking a seconder.
I consider that friendly.
It's friendly?
It's friendly.
Very good. Councillor Bennett, so it's on the floor. Do you remember who your seconder was? I'm assuming it was Councillor Wall?
No, it was not. It was Councillor Sless, if he wants to.
Okay. I believe, unless the clerk wants to correct me, Councillor Sless would also have to agree that it's friendly.
Through the chair, at this point, it would actually be in the hands of the body. So if there's no objection to it, be considered friendly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think we do so. Thank you for that. So we'll go to Councillor Antosky on the amendment. Or actually, Councillor Wall, did you want to motivate the amendment? Speak to it. It's an amendment, so you have your open speaking term again.
I appreciate that, Chair Weaver. Thank you. Yeah, look, obviously I'm conflicted on this. I just think that if we are going to do this, I would really like to see how much of an impact it actually makes. And I think that that's kind of the reason we do anything, right? We would find out whether or not it makes a difference. And you know what? If there have been 50 reported calls, and I just want the stats. And I think that if in 2022 this has resolved a ton of problems, then I'll support it. But if it hasn't, then I will, yes, be moving a reconsider. Okay. And this is the best way to do it. Get data.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Antosky, on the amendment.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate this as a friendly. I'm just wondering if I can squeak in another friendly between the complaint and the fines. We have an education piece, so a complaint may be founded or unfounded, but I'd also want to know how many of them are founded and I guess a warning stage. Maybe bylaw can comment on what that would be, because just because there's been a complaint doesn't mean it's founded. So, but they're not necessarily fined either. So I'd like to know the occurrences, whatever we call that. Number of warnings issued, perhaps.
Apology, Councillor Antosky, point of order, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Carpenter.
When so-called amendments become friendly amendments, they form the body, and they're not an amendment giving more speaking opportunities unless they're a formal amendment. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I was aware of that during Councillor Antosky's conversation. I was going to ask the clerk to clarify that for me, but thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Antosky, I did start your speaking opportunity, so if you'd like to finish, please go ahead. You're muted, Councillor.
My apologies. I guess I'm asking then for an amendment to include the word formal warnings.
To the report that you're requesting. So I would ask, would that be considered friendly?
Yeah, that'll be considered friendly too, because look, they investigate. They're not going to go after frivolous stuff, and we're going to see who's serious and why. So I think that's good for us. We can all have a whole dock of reservation. That's friendly.
Okay, and I'll make the determination that it is friendly, because unfortunately Councillor Sless is having some technical difficulties. So we'll say that forms the body of the resolution. So without any further questions or comments, we'll call the question on this item.
And Mayor Davis, you're the last to vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 8.1 with the friendly amendments is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver.
Thank you. That brings us to item 8.2, which is the Mohawk Institute Save the Evidence. This item is being brought forward by Councilor Van Tilburg, and he is requesting a waiving of the rules. So we will need to have a vote. 2/3 is required to be able to put this item on the floor. In the absence of a successful vote, we would consider this item as given notice, and we would discuss it at the next meeting. So Councilor Van Tilburg, would you please move your motion to waive the rules, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Motion to waive the rules that section 1511.5 of the City of Brantford procedural bylaw be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without prior notice of motion. Whereas the recent use of groundbreaking penetrating radar at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School uncovered the remains of 215 children. And whereas Six Nations of the Grand River Chief Mark Hill has written an open letter to the government requesting to immediately be supplied with the technology to conduct the same search at and around the grounds at the former Mohawk Institute Residential School in Brantford, Ontario. And whereas the Save the Evidence campaign is a campaign to raise awareness and support for the restoration of the former Mohawk Institute Residential School and to develop the building into an interpreted historic site and educational resource. And whereas Woodland Cultural Center's operating funding provided through the Federal Indigenous Services Canada's First Nation and Inuit Cultural Education Centers program was reduced in 2018 due to limited availability, providing additional pressure on Woodland Cultural Center to express, preserve, develop, revitalize, and promote their culture, language, heritage for future generations. And whereas the Save the Evidence campaign relies solely on donations to achieve their goal of a fully realized interpretive center that will be the definitive destination for information about the history and the ongoing legacy of residential schools in Canada. Now, therefore, be it resolved. A, that the City of Brantford requests that the Government of Canada furnish Six Nations of the Grand River with the technology necessary to immediately conduct a comprehensive search for missing children on and around the grounds of the former Mohawk Institute. And B, that the federal government be requested to fully fund the Save the Evidence campaign as part of reconciliation rather than relying on donations. And C, that the federal government be requested to increase funding to First Nations and Inuit Cultural Education Center programs offered through Federal Indigenous Services Canada to provide stable, ongoing operating funding to Woodland Cultural Center and other cultural centers across Canada to protect and revitalize Indigenous language and culture. D, that the federal government be requested to provide support for survivors and their families during this time, as many have been re-traumatized after the remains of 215 children were uncovered at the Kamloops Residential School. And E, that the Corporation of the City of Brantford build and maintain partnership with Woodland Cultural Center to address the ongoing intergenerational impact of the residential school on survivors and their families.
Thank you, Councillor. Did you wish to have a speaking opportunity?
With regards to why I wish to waive the rules?
Oh, I apologize. You're correct. So I'll call the vote on waiving the rules. And again, we do need 2/3. So please call the vote.
Councillor Martin, I am waiting for your vote.
And I think you're waiting for mine, which is yes.
Thank you.
My iPad seems to be locked up. There it goes.
The motion to waive the rules is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Celeste, McCreary, Martin, Carpenter, Antosky, and Van Tilburg, noting Councillor Wall's conflict of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Van Tilburg, please take your opportunity to speak now.
Certainly. And I'll be brief because I believe the things that have happened in the past couple of weeks with the finding of the 215 bodies speaks for itself and for the shame of what happened at residential schools. So just to put it in the simplest of terms, whatever path the members of Six Nations communities, their leaders, wish to take, the purpose of this resolution is to support it. So if there are elements in there that are not seen as needed or necessary, or they say they haven't decided what they want to do, that's for them. I'm just saying I want to put it out there for council to say we're here, we support you, and if members of council can find clearer and better ways to say some of these words in the resolution, that's fine. But I think we all will get the understanding of what this is about. And this is about healing, and that's going to take some time, and it's about giving them whatever is needed to in some way put their minds to rest. And they have started, I know there was a debate once before in their community about whether they tear down the residential school or not. And you can imagine the pain. And they worked through that, and they've kept it. And now, I think about it, and it's that they have this monument there that is Save the Evidence. So there's a number of things here to help. And, just as an aside, their voices, and I remember a United Church minister came to Brantford and spoke about the potential of what was at Kamloops. They weren't listened to. And it's real. And so, let's give them the power and the support that they need to handle with the federal government to get what they need.
Thank you, Councillor. We do need a seconder to get this item on the floor, despite the fact
that was Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, that was for waiving the rules, just making sure.
And Councillor Carpenter was a seconder for the resolution as well.
Thank you. Is that clear, Julia?
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for those words, Councillor Van Tilburg. So next I have Councillor Antosky, followed by Councillor Van der Steldt and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Councillor Van Tilburg and Councillor Carpenter for bringing this forward. I had contacted Councillor Van Tilburg when it first came out. I had some concerns, should this be coming from settlers saying this is what we should do? And so I was happy to hear that, Councillor Van Tilburg has done his research and spoken with people, and he's offered an explanation here tonight just to say, whatever they need, we're there beside them, we're there to support them, we're there to help through this. So I'm very happy to see this here. I went to the residential school this week to put some shoes down, and it makes it very real. There are some notes from children there. Sorry, this is our community. There is no community, in my mind, more important to move something like this forward. We are next to the biggest reservation in Canada and the longest operating residential school. So I think it's really important that we show our support on this, and whatever that means, if that means us going down to Ottawa again, if that means us meeting with whoever needs to be met with, and however our neighbors need and want this to be addressed, we should be there as their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van der Steldt.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. Thank you to both Councillors Van Tilburg and Carpenter for bringing this forward. Councillor Van Tilburg, I can tell by the passion in your voice, you feel this as deeply as we all do. And I appreciate the chance to chat with you about it and about how we might be able to come alongside our communities and offer support. And respectfully, during the course of that conversation, I think we came to the same kind of a realization. I do have an amendment that I would respectfully like to bring forward when others have had an opportunity to speak. But once again, thank you for bringing this forward in such a fashion, in a supporting fashion, in just a terrible time in our history. And please come back to me, Mr. Chair.
I will do so. Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Davis, please go ahead.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank Councillor Van Tilburg and Councillor Carpenter. And I come to this with a kind of a long experience with this matter. My Rotary Club Sunrise, about 5 or 6 years ago, made the largest single private donation from a nonprofit of $25,000 to Save the Evidence campaign. So I know of the history and have known it for some time. So the lands that the Woodland Cultural Center sits on, and part of that is the Mohawk Institute building. They are on lands that form part of the Six Nations Reserve. The buildings and the surrounding lands are part of the Six Nations territory. And that's a very unique history that we have in this area. And because of that, the decisions made as to what will be done in respect to surveys is made by that nation. And in respect of that, I did very shortly, a day or two after, reached out directly to Chief Mark Hill, the chief of the elected Six Nations Council, and told him that our community stood by his nation and were prepared to offer whatever assistance or support we could as they determine what it is that they want to do and what it is they need. And he appreciated that, and he indicated that they're going through a consultative process. It's a bit complicated because the survivors come from more than just the Six Nations. They come from Indigenous nations across Ontario and other parts of Canada. So it's a little bit convoluted, I think. I'm guessing it is. And so Chief Hill advised me that once they've determined a very clear path forward and what it is they might need from us, that he will pass to meet with me. And so I'm waiting for that to happen. And I think we'd be in a position certainly to provide more than just, let's just say, whatever it is they need that we can reasonably provide, and we stand by them. I lost my lighting here. We'll do it. And so this can be part of that process. And I think one thing, and I think perhaps Councillor Vanderstelt might speak to that, and that is it may be a good idea to, I guess, kind of run this past, so to speak, the Six Nations to determine if this is what they want us to do and if this is what they need or they need something else. So, but I think we're all, I would believe, united in that we do that. We stand by them and help wherever we can in this process.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Carpenter, please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Van Tilburg for his leadership. I know that the residential schools in Ward 5 on Mohawk Street, a couple terms ago, I had the opportunity to speak at the residential school gathering when we were talking about saving the evidence. And I made a personal apology on behalf of myself, because I don't speak for council, and my grandchildren and my children. I was a youngster riding my bike past that residential school, and it would have been an operation, and the suffering would have been happening inside those doors that I wouldn't have been aware of. And I apologize for not being aware. And with Mayor Friel, previous Mayor Friel, that brought forward the first recommendation for Save the Evidence campaign, and this council, the council of the day, it has supported that Save the Evidence campaign for all those reasons. It's important. Truth and reconciliation can't happen unless people have education, and a lot of people in our community aren't aware of what the residential school that existed in our community, and it existed for many years. It was the last one to close, in fact. So it's important that we recognize And the education system in our community should be educating the children in the schools, our school system, the public school system, and Catholic school system about the residential schools. So if we don't remember our history, we will repeat it. And we need to learn from that mistake, which is really a way to, and genocide's thrown around too much these days, but it was a way to wipe out the culture and heritage of First Nations people. And it was truly wrong. And I'm really disappointed in both the federal governments of all parties that haven't fixed this problem and haven't dealt with it, haven't apologized officially. I guess they have apologized recently, but they should be doing what they need to do is resolve the Indian Act and provide Indigenous population with their own, a nation within a nation. Just think how it would support Canada having a nation within a nation. It wouldn't be a province that could even threaten separation again, because we'd have a nation within a nation holding the nation together. We need to really stand up and reconcile our past here. And this resolution goes a long ways towards that. And you know, if the federal government, provincial governments don't step up, then I think we should. It's our community. And quite often we found ourselves that we as council have to do what the federal and provincial government either refuse to do or can't do. We've done that several times and we've led the way in this community. So I was happy to second the resolution. I think we need to really pour our hearts out to what the First Nations people are going through right now, because this is just another reminder of those that have attended, and it's intergenerational, or the problems that come from that are intergenerational. And we need to recognize that just because you weren't at the school, you may have had parents at the school, or you may have been raised without your parents because they were at the school, or your siblings. So we need to address all those issues. So thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg, for your leadership on this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions or comments, we'll go to Councillor Vanderstelt for his amendment.
Thank you again, Chair Weaver. Because it's so far-reaching and deep-reaching into the souls and hearts of so many people, I just want to make sure that we've got the language right, we've got the wording right, we've got the direction right. And I really think what we could do is we could just send this to Chief Mark Hill's office in its perhaps amended format, and just have him double check with his community and say, okay, is this, you know, should we be accepting this? Is this the direction we would like the City of Brantford to take along with us? So I did put something together. Julia, are you able to share the proposed amendment on the screen there? So the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford expresses its full support for Chief Mark Hill's letter to the Right Honorable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sent on May 31st, 2021 in its entirety. That would, the purpose of that clause would be to replace A, just showing our full support for what he's already done. And that B, C, and D, and E be respectfully submitted to the office of Chief Mark Hill for comment and discussion within the elected council's consultation process with the people of Six Nations. I should have included there, and my apologies, Julia, and beyond, because this consultation process involves so many more First Nations across Canada, just because of how horrendously far-reaching this behavior went. So I apologize for making you do this on the fly, but if we could add that section, people of Six Nations and beyond, I would appreciate that. I don't have much more to say other than I just want to double check with Chief Mark Hill, so he can check with his council, he can check with his staff, he can check with his people, just to make sure that we've got this right, that we're not overstepping our bounds, and that we show support in the right way by his direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Who was your seconder?
Councillor Carpenter.
No, sorry, Councillor, for the amendment.
I am seeking a seconder.
Councillor McCreary.
Thank you.
Okay. Any question, comment on the amendment?
I consider that friendly if Councillor Carpenter does, or if we wish to debate it, but I think that goes wholeheartedly with what I was thinking.
I believe you're right. So I think I'm very comfortable saying that that's part of the resolution. So we'll just make that part of the body. So on the, as amended, is there anybody that wishes to talk or question, answer? No. Okay, I'll call the vote.
Mayor Davis, your vote, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 8.2 with the friendly amendment carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Weaver, noting Councillor Wall's conflict of interest.
Thank you for that. And with that, there is no notices of motion for tonight's meeting, and we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you very much. We did some very good work tonight, folks. Thank you.